Okay, it's time to call this regular meeting of the City Council of Loma to order. Secretary, here. Present.
Councilman Daly.
Present.
Councilman
Here.
And Mayor.
Here. Serve our country and our city, but this community. We ask that you continue to bless us and give us the wisdom as we make decisions that's in the best interest of the community at large. Thank you once again for the many blessings. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Okay, now we come to the oral report public participation section. Are there any comments by members of the public on any items not on the agenda? Okay, we have one.
Good evening. I just would like to highlight just a couple of things for you that the Chamber of Commerce has coming up in the coming weeks. As the mayor mentioned last council meeting, we're coming up on our 40th anniversary of the incorporation of Loma. I believe that's September 29th. I got that date right. Next council meeting, before the next council meeting on the 28th, the City of Loma and the council and the Chamber is partnering to have a little reception before the council meeting for us to look back and see how far we've come in the last 40 years. And we hope that people listening and the people here will come and join us. On September 27th, the Loma University Student Association is having their Welcome Back Bash. Where they welcome the students back to the university. That's 5 to 7 in the evening on the grounds between the dental school and the university church, right in front of the Wanakili Conference Center. It's an opportunity for you as council to come out and meet the students and them to meet you, but as well as for the businesses in town and organizations in town. The Loma University offers booth space for free. It's a chance for the students to learn the businesses and what the city has to offer. And we hope that people that are listening will take advantage of that, because we've done it every year when I was at the market, and it was a fantastic chance to get the students to meet them and know them, and I think it's something good for the community and for our economy. And last but certainly not least is the Loma Parade and Fair on October 17th. And we can participate in a number of ways. We hope each council member will come out and ride in our parade. We have vehicles for you, fire engines and fancy cars and so on and so forth for the people watching the parade to get a chance to get a look at you. For those listening, there's opportunities for entries in the parade for your business, your organization, to come out and let people learn about you. And of course, it wouldn't be a parade without people standing on the sidelines watching the parade. And there's a fair afterward at the Loma Linda Academy, so it's a fun day. It's a chance for us to feel good about Loma Linda, not that we don't every day, but it's a special day to feel good about Loma Linda. So this is some of the things that the Chamber of Commerce has going, and we just invite you to support us and help us make those events successful. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Phil. Go ahead. There's a question for you, I think.
I have an old 1948 MGTC. If I get that running, then I can, instead of riding in somebody else's car, I can ride in my own little old car.
Sure, yeah, we'd love to have that out there. It's always fun to have the real vintage cars out there. So that would be a treasure if you could do that.
Well, the big risk is whether I can get it put together by then, but
Well,
we'll find out.
Then what are you doing here? Get home and work on it.
Yeah, and if it doesn't run, I can get the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem to push it for me. I assume that.
Now that would really be a sight. You probably have a lot of time on the news for that one. Yeah.
Good thing it's downhill.
Hey, Ron, you might have to get a pass from the sheriff because it's probably not registered.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments on any non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we'll deal with conflict of interest as it arises. We have item G1, which is a presentation to Mary Lee Rosenbaum. I hear she can't be here tonight. She has schedule conflict on city council nights. But Mary Lee Rosenbaum was on the Planning Commission for over 17 years, from its initial founding as a Planning Commission until last month. And we have a nice plaque for her in recognition of her community service on the Planning Commission for all those years. And we just congratulate her on her service to the city. We thank her very much, and she's probably out there. Maybe you could watch this on tape, but I understand Mr. Wiley would like to make a comment. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment on Planning Commission? Mr. Wiley.
Thanks, sir. I'd like to say that I have been active with Mary for most of 2000, and it's one of those things that we started workshops. We were able to see what was going on and got to know her at that point. For the last probably 6+ years, we've been at most all of the Planning Commission meetings, and there has been a lot of leadership in her. She will, when projects come before the commission, she'll turn around and thoroughly do her work, gets into it, and if there's a lot of wall massing, how can we break this up to make it look better? Sure, it requires a little more money in the project, but it becomes a better project in the end. I think the same thing goes with looking at the plans. What are in the house or apartments? I know one time she said, you know, women like to have windows in front of the sinks or the stoves, not in the corner. Can we change that? Well, yeah, I think we could. Well, this was a perspective that a lot of times I think we sort of run through things real quick and don't look at it. And as I say, I've seen this over the last 6+ years, and she has been a great leader. At times she'll be in here and people will say, well, I want to make a motion on this. Well, did you consider this, or do you want to add that? Or in other words, she's giving advice. And this is where time and experience pays off. Because if you're in, you just sort of will make a motion. The only one that may sit there and say, would you like to do it a little differently, is either Deborah or Rich. And she will give them the leadership on this, and I know she has done a great job, and unfortunately she's not here tonight, but it's one of those things that I wish the council could have been there to see some of her workings on major projects and things, you know, normal business like here, normal business, but you get projects or big issues, it's a little different story. So, you know, she's one that's going to be sorely missed on the planning commission because she had this heart for this town. It's the heart of what she was doing. And I think it will be a much better and beautiful place because of a lot of things that she had input doing with. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to say that over the 10 years that I've been here, Mary obviously has been on the commission, and I have always appreciated her interest, the amount of time that she spends preparing for the meetings, and her attendance, and certainly her dedication to her position as planning commission, her responsibilities, and I think also the way that she would bring the commissioners together to make a decision. She was a peacemaker for the most part, and we will miss her.
Thank you for that, and I think we can all echo those comments. Next, item G2, we have a presentation of a proclamation to the fire department declaring September 2010 as National Preparedness Month. I'm not quite sure how a city can declare a national month, but I think what we're doing is we're joining a National Preparedness Month as a city. I'm fairly new to proclamations, so bear with me. These are the statements that have more whereases than other words, than other documents. And I don't think we need to read the whole thing, but we can start with a preamble. Proclamation National Preparedness Month, September 2010. Whereas National Preparedness Month creates an important opportunity for every resident of the city of Loma Linda to prepare their home, business, and community for any type of emergency from natural disasters to potential terrorist attacks. And whereas investing in the preparedness of ourselves, our families, businesses, and community can reduce fatalities and economic devastation in our community and in our nation. And whereas there are federal agencies involved, and whereas emergency preparedness is the responsibility of every citizen, and whereas all of the citizens of the city of Loma Linda are encouraged to participate, therefore be it resolved that I declare on behalf of the City Council that September 2010 is National Preparedness Month. And I encourage all citizens and businesses to develop their own emergency preparedness plan and work together toward creating a more prepared society. And who is here to accept this?
Thank you so much, and you did a great job in reading that. I was really glad you had to read it too.
I abbreviated it.
We really want to encourage people in Loma Linda to really get ready for large earthquake or any type of disaster. And that is one of our goals this month, is to reach out to as many people as we can and help them to understand that following a large disaster, that fire and police may not be able to get to them, and they will be on their own for a while. And so what we're trying to do is teach the public how to put together a plan and a kit. You've heard some of these things before, but we're really trying to get out there, even if, you know, one person by one person, and we'll get out there and do that. On September 21st, we are having a meeting, a disaster preparedness community meeting. It's in the Emergency Operations Center here at the Civic Center, and we encourage as many people to come out here as you can. We'll give you some good information about preparing for disasters and how as a city we're going to respond also. And this is going to take about 45 minutes to an hour long. So it's not too long, and we encourage folks to come out to join us for that. And there is a group of people in the city here that have taken their own time out, and they've gone through a 20-hour training. And if you look behind me, you will notice all these folks in green. This is our CERT team, a handful of people from our Community Emergency Response Team. These are the folks that have taken their time to go through that 20-hour training and learn how to prepare their families and their neighborhoods for disaster. And also, following disaster, the emergency services are going to need some more hands. And so we are building relationships with them so they can respond with us after a disaster also. So great group of people. We have a lot of fun. They learn a lot. And if people are interested in CERT, they can call the fire department or my phone number, 909-799-2860, and I can give them some more information about CERT. So once again, this is a great group of people in your community that are stepping up for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your help. Now we get to item 3A and 3B and 4. These are taken together. We're having public hearings on these, and I'm not quite sure how to handle the fact that we've got two competing projects and we do separate public hearings on each. Is that usually the way we handle this? Okay. So we'll start with a description by staff, and then we'll open the public hearing, and then we'll have discussion by the council.
The first project is Precise Plan of Design number 10-138, and the project is named Aiden's Walk Senior Apartments, and it is an affordable senior apartment project. The developer...
Deborah, could we interrupt? The attorney would like to make a comment.
Mr. Mayor, were you intending to open the redevelopment agency as a joint meeting at this time?
Well, I'm not quite sure because item number 4 is a joint public hearing. Is that the only part that's joint?
I believe
both
so.
are.
And my reason for asking was that I did need to give our report on the redevelopment agency closed session.
Okay.
And I wanted to do that before we started the joint meeting.
Okay, then.
I'll open the redevelopment agency. Go ahead, Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor. The City Council, in the capacity of the Redevelopment Agency Board, was in closed session on item number 1 on the Redevelopment Agency agenda. That was a conference with real property negotiator regarding property listed, and the agency board gave direction, received a report. There's no final action to report at this time. Thank you.
Okay, come on back. Sorry about that. We're learning our way around these things.
For Rich, it's okay. As I mentioned, this is Precise Plan of Design 10-138. The developer is TRG Pacific Development LLC, and the applicant for this project is here and would like to give a short presentation following staff's. And the Loma Linda Redevelopment Agency is involved with this project. The land is redevelopment agency land located on the west side of Poplar, approximately 1 lot depth north of Van Leuven Street. The size of the property is 5.46 acres. The project proposes 152 units in 2 3-story buildings, and it is a mix of 1 bedroom, 120 would be 1 bedroom, and 32 would be 2-bedroom units. The project would have on-site management, indoor amenities, clubhouse with a club room, business center, library, fitness center, laundry, administrative offices, and also as I mentioned, the administrative offices for the complex. Thank you. Amenities will be an amenity area that will facilitate on-site educational programs and other activities, and residential activity rooms dispersed throughout the two buildings. The unit amenities are household appliances provided, including, and I should add on the third bullet, that is washer and dryer hookups, not washer and dryers. Private balconies for most units. And next slide, please. Outdoor amenities, a large swimming pool, outdoor activity area, gazebo, garden, courtyard, barbecue and picnic areas, community garden and tool shed, and lattice-covered seating areas and walking paths. And the architecture is Mediterranean, and it is a little different than the architecture across the street to the east, where we have the Poplar Street Apartments and the Loma Linda Commons, but the two architectural styles are compatible. This one is stone trim with stucco pop-out features utilized to provide articulation and wall plane variation. The color palette is a little bit different. It uses a brown and a beige and reddish earth tones. So it's to a degree a little bit darker than the units across the street. The unit sizes themselves range from 601 to 806 square feet. And here is the site vicinity map, and here's the project. Van Leuven Street runs to the south of it, Poplar Street and the creek. The two existing projects that are affordable but not senior developments are on the east side of the street in this area. Okay, next slide, please. This is the site plan, and over here we would have Poplar Street and the entrance with the driveway around. This is essentially building 1 and building 2. The swimming pool, community gardens, just to point out a few of the features. Next slide, please. The elevations, east, rear west A, rear west B. Next slide, please. North elevation continued. It continues on from here. South elevation. Next slide, please. This is in the interior courtyard looking at the south elevation of, I believe it's building 1, or no, building 2. And then courtyard south and courtyard north and courtyard west. And this is the activity center in here and the administrative offices, and courtyard east. The units, this one is 601 square feet. It is a 1-bedroom, and I believe it says 1 bath, but I think it's 2 bath, isn't it? 2 bath, right, okay. And then the 1-bedroom, this is another style of 1-bedroom, and then we have the 2-bedroom, 2 bath. Next slide, landscape plan. There is a fairly dense perimeter landscaping, and the Planning Commission had asked for a 6-foot perimeter fence out of tubular steel, which would look like wrought iron. And so that would go along here, and the applicant has agreed to that, and it's been added as a condition of approval. Let's see, next slide, please. This obviously is a little hard to read, but it is the conceptual hardscape plan. And next slide, please. These are conceptual details of different features that these are examples of what they would look like. Next slide, please. Planning Commission recommendations on this project were some additional conditions of approval. Add bicycle racks throughout the project. Add a second pedestrian link from the right-of-way. There is a pedestrian link kind of at the south entrance, the main entrance to the building, but along the south edge of that, there is a pedestrian link, and the Commission has asked that there be one at the north side as well, to be a little bit more convenient to pedestrians. And then the 6-foot tubular steel fencing. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission had a separate recommendation, and this recommendation actually applied to both of the projects, 3A and 3B. And they are concerned that Poplar Street is fairly narrow from the north boundary of the three projects, two on the east side, one on the west, all the way up to Redlands Boulevard. And so they know that on the capital improvement plan that there is an item for improvement to Poplar Street, which would include street and bridge widening, curb, gutter, and sidewalks all the way north to Redlands Boulevard. I don't believe it's in this year of the capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan. However, they're asking that the council consider that it happens sooner than later. And City Manager, did you want to say something?
There's no funding at these times.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, the Planning Commission for this project, the project met all of the city's requirements, and so they recommended that the council adopt a mitigated negative declaration and approve the precise plan of design number 10-138 based on the findings that are in the Planning Commission staff report, which is attached to your staff report, and subject to the amended conditions of approval. The end. Now, if you would like to ask questions of staff, or would you like to go on to the applicant's presentation?
Looks like a question of staff.
Okay, sir. All right.
I actually have a couple of questions. If you roll back to the slides, there was a fairly complex slide there, and I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to learn from it. And if you'd help me with that.
Okay.
The
I think you're
hardscape
talking
plan?
about the hardscape plan. Basically,
That one,
it essentially shows you where all the different hardscapes are going to be on site, meaning the sidewalks and what kind of materials they're made out of. And for example, you've got, like probably a tile or stamped concrete finish around the pool area, and you have stamped concrete or I can't read it myself either at this point.
There's a copy of it in your packet.
There is, but it shows you different pavement types.
Okay.
The concrete asphalt driveway, sidewalks, so forth and so on.
And if I'm looking at this correctly, just west of the pool, there's a large, exactly, what is that?
This is an outdoor activity area that could be used for a number of things, and I believe that the interior of that is grass. It's
And there's
grass.
there's a pool restroom.
Right, and then the perimeter though is I think it's concrete.
Other question is, I don't know if this should be directed to the Planning Commission or to you or to staff, but as someone that's spent a little time in Europe, I'm trying to understand why we need to have wide streets in all the neighborhoods. Can anybody help me with that?
We drive American cars to begin with.
Yeah,
Well, maybe it's time to downsize.
Yeah. Planning staff typically, and I'm talking about myself as well as other planning staff throughout the nation, always like livable, walkable communities where you have narrow streets with traffic controls and features that will slow down traffic and kind of naturally bring them to a slower speed so that they can't go cruising through neighborhoods at 55 miles an hour. However, we frequently are at odds with engineering staff who like to have very adequate, shall we say, right-of-ways so that traffic can flow smoothly and so forth and so on. The projects on the south side of Mission Road are one example of how they can be done, perhaps not the best example. But there are ways of doing it so that it's not necessarily a traffic tie-up or a problem.
I guess part of my confusion is I'm assuming if we're talking about a senior affordable apartment or condominium complex, I'm not sure how many of those people will be driving anyway. So I can understand the need for transportation ease, but I'm not sure it means that we necessarily need to widen the streets.
I think the Commission's concern was that we have essentially this proposed project and the two projects, one of which is completed and the other under construction on the east side. And that the combined traffic from those three projects, in addition to the neighborhood existing traffic, would become a problem on Poplar Street until the improvements are done. Public Works had weighed in on that as part of the review process, and their recommendation was that the project is fine without the widening, and that the traffic controls at Redlands Boulevard is more than adequate to handle the current traffic levels and the traffic levels with these three projects. However, at some point, though, we'd like to put curb, gutter, and sidewalk and widen the bridge to be a bit more accommodating for traffic as well as pedestrians.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. The other question has to do with the bicycle racks. Again, affordable senior housing, bicycle racks. Help me understand the nexus there.
The Commission would like to have bicycle racks available for people who do ride bicycles. As a senior who rides a bicycle, I kind of agree. But they are something that would probably be used if they're scattered throughout, and maybe not rows and rows of them, just enough to provide convenient bike racks.
I assume there are benchmark studies that would indicate to us what the utilization level would be with senior housing and bicycle racks. Have we checked that out?
We have not. However, the project proponents for both this project and the next project have this condition added to their projects, and whoever ends up building a project will work with staff and probably based on their experience with senior projects will take their input on what they think is appropriate for 152 units and the amount of occupancy they could have.
And
well, I respect that because I'm at an age where I would fit in there now, but I don't know how many people would be riding bicycles, but thank you.
well, I also understand that we can, as the council, add conditions or subtract conditions placed upon the project by the Planning Commission.
You can also modify those conditions. Yes, sir. Okay. Are we ready for the other presentation?
Yes.
Okay. The applicant is Pam Mikas with TRG.
Good evening. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed development in greater detail. I won't spend too much time since Deborah did such a great job providing some of the slides that you've already seen and you have in your packages as well. Pam Mikas with the Richmond Group. I head up all of the California development operations. I've been with the Richmond Group for about 13 years now. When I started, we were the 26th largest apartment owner in the country, and we've grown to the 8th largest in that amount of time, not by acquiring other companies, but by doing development by development. We're not only a developer, we're also a tax credit syndicator. We've raised over $7 billion to invest in housing developments such as the one that you're reviewing tonight. We provide tax credit investors for not only our own developments, but for third-party developers as well. We've developed over 15,000 units throughout the country, and we are long-term owners and property managers of the housing that we build. So we build to own and manage for the long term. I didn't want to go through the same pictures of some of the developments that we've completed that you have in our brochure. I just wanted to show you some of the completed developments and how amenity-rich most of our developments are. So here we spent a lot of time designing the courtyard. There's a pool as you exit the building. Here is a fitness center in that same development. This is the club room in that same development. And we spend a lot of time with interior designers to make sure that our developments are more like a luxurious hotel. This is an example of a project here in California that we completed. Another development in California. This one has a pool as well. Here's an example of a completed kitchen. Another example. Here's an example of a clubhouse entry room as well as a kitchen. And now we're on to the proposed development, which Deborah spent a lot of time explaining. Again, here are the unit plans. We have 3 different types, 2 one-bedroom types and 1 2-bedroom type. The 2 bedrooms have 2 bathrooms. We have washer-dryer connections in all of the units, and we have balconies and patios in most of the units as well. We did revise the site plan to include some of the conditions of the Planning Commission. We added the fencing around the perimeter. It's probably hard to see on this slide. We added the walkway to the north of the turnaround. We had a walkway on the south side of the turnaround, but now we added the walkway to the north side of the turnaround. And that area that I believe Councilman Daly was questioning what that was for, thank you, Deborah, to the left of the pool, we proposed that as a bocce ball court area. And again, here's the landscape plan, again showing the addition of the fence and the walkway to the north side of the turnaround. And here's some examples that we were thinking about with the architect and the landscape architect for what the entry gates could look like. Again, a vision of what the pool and courtyard area could look like. An example of what the lobby could look like. You've seen this slide already, and again, like Deborah explained, these are just some of the ideas we had for the fixtures that would be placed on the exterior of the property. To give you some information about the financial characteristics of the proposed development, the development would pay roughly $2.7 million in impact fees. We're proposing that we would pay 100% of the fees that are due for this proposed development. The city would also get roughly $150,000 in various fees. So all the fees that would be owed by this development would be paid by this development. The financial request that we're looking for from the city is simply the land, either via a lease, a long-term lease, or a fee simple, and we're not asking for another contribution from the city. Some information about the types of households that we would serve. This development would certainly help the city meet its RHNA obligations. 52 units would be for low-income households, 98 would be for very low, and there are 2 non-tax credit units that we've indicated that we would be amenable to reserving those for moderate-income households. Again, further helping the city meet its RHNA obligations. Some of the benefits that Deborah touched on-site management and maintenance staff. We'll have on-site services and programs provided to the residents at no cost. And you saw that we have a fitness center in the clubhouse, a library, a business center, on-site laundry, in addition to the washer-dryer connections in the unit. And the units themselves will have high-speed internet access, an Energy Star appliance package, and balconies and patios in most of the units. So if you have any questions for me, I'm certainly here to answer any of them. Unless you wanted to move on to the other applicant, I wasn't sure what the protocol is.
Well, we don't have a protocol yet. We'll play it by ear.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to be sure I'm the only one that has questions.
You're the only one who turned your mic on.
Pool. Why is the pool important? And what's the utilization level of a pool in a senior housing project? Or do
Very high.
Very high.
Very high.
Okay. And are there planned activities in the pool?
Well, we would love to work with the university and other physicians in the area to create programs in the pool. That would be part of the amenity package and programs and services that we could provide at the site. And we certainly planned on that.
That leads to another question, which is, I'm not quite clear on whether TRG would, once you have the property and put up the development, you would own and manage the operation as well?
Correct.
And so if I'm a potential customer, do I have the option to purchase or only to rent?
Only to rent.
Okay.
Correct.
And so in terms of planning pool activities and so forth, that would ultimately be the responsibility of TRG as a management
Correct.
organization.
It's the property manager on site, working with the tenants and deciding what they would like to do.
Okay. Also in the proposal, I saw references, and we talked about this a little earlier, about few trees and minimum grass. I'm a lots of trees and lots of grass sort of guy, and so help me understand that.
Well, we would be obligated to work with the city staff in determining whether our development met your drought-tolerant landscaping plan. So we would work closely with the staff in coming up with the final landscape plan. But we like lots of trees and grass as well.
So I turn to the city manager. Do we have a master plan or regulations regarding how much grass and trees and so forth?
We have preferred use of drought tolerant plants, and the plant that we planted along the San Mateo Channel, we use a drip system to irrigate the trees and shrubs and so forth. So it will be similar.
But we're confident that somebody that looks like me that moves in there with white skin is going to have an adequate shade so I can enjoy the facilities without getting sunburned.
Yes, and look at the landscaping plan they have. Look like there's a lot of trees.
It's quite elaborate. Yeah,
Okay.
it's very elaborate.
Now, the landscape plan was shown in the previous presentation, and their plan does meet city code, and it does go a little bit further in terms of lots of trees, lots of shrubs and ground cover, and lawn, as well as both projects offer us community gardens, which we're finding in these tough economic times are very popular.
Okay, good. Because I'm looking at where I may live someday, so I've got to be sure I understand these things. Thank you.
I have some questions regarding timing. I'm looking at a timeline that you've presented in your project here, and I've studied both projects, and I know that both of you guys are looking for the same funding, which is the FHLB. Can you touch upon what that is? And I noticed that you have an October 1st deadline, and I've been told by staff that that deadline is not correct. So help me understand, what is the deadline?
There is an October 1st deadline.
Okay, so
Right. The Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco is the regional reserve bank for projects here in California.
and what is FHLB?
Federal Home Loan Bank.
Okay,
FHLB.
just back what you just said.
Yeah.
Okay, so one way or another, if we want either project to be, try to get those, securing those funds, we have to approve it before October 1st.
Well, it would be great if you would approve it sooner than that, since it takes some time to put together that application.
Okay.
We do have a member bank that will sponsor our application and will work with us in making sure we can meet that deadline of October 1st.
So if whatever happened, if we did it 2 weeks from now, would that cause undue burden or make it more challenging for either one of you? And I'm going to ask the same question of the other side as well.
It would be very difficult to put together an application in 24 hours.
Our next
If you're
council meeting
talking about 2 weeks.
okay. Well, our next council meeting is the 28th, and I guess October 1st is still 3 days.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks.
Okay. All right. And if you miss the deadline for whatever reason, what happens next?
There's an April 1st deadline.
So then
next
we
year.
automatically go for next
There's
year.
2 dates where the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco accepts applications for these funds, April 1st and October 1st.
Okay. Thank you.
Couple of general questions, and maybe this is unfair since we haven't heard the other presentation, but I'll ask you since you're up here. Looking through some of the figures on construction costs and so forth, my rough back of the envelope eyeball calculation, it looks like you're projecting construction costs about 30% less than the other developer. I'm having trouble understanding how the figures could be that discrepant. There's basic costs for certain things are quite standard. Obviously, when you get into amenities, the cost per square foot can change dramatically based on amenities. Help me understand why your construction costs seem to be so much less than the other applicant, or can you lead me to some understanding of that issue?
Well, I don't know the details of the other application, but that percentage you just described to me is a percentage that's often thrown out to describe the difference between a prevailing wage project and a non-prevailing wage project. So our development is a non-prevailing wage development, which means we can keep the construction costs lower, which means we would require less subsidy in order to make the development financially feasible.
Can staff help me with the other project prevailing wages? Sorry, maybe I should wait, but be something I'll be interested to hear from the other developers. So if that's the explanation of difference in costs, I think that is important to keep in mind. The second question I'll just throw out to you, having worked with the other proposed developer, and I have not had the occasion to see your projects in our city limits, what can you do to give me and the community more of a comfort level? I guess, we're all human beings. We develop a certain comfort level when we've done business with X business or X group, and things seem to have gone well, and there's always a slight unease if it's some new entity that you're not familiar with. Can you help me with some thoughts in that direction? Because that is one issue that I have heard voiced.
Sure. Some of the items that I laid out for you earlier in my presentation about some of the facts about our company. We're not only a developer, but we're also a tax credit syndicator, and we work with all the major lenders and investors in the country. And many of those lenders not only provide tax credit equity to our company, but they also provide debt financing for many of our developments. So they see our company in many different ways. They're poring over our financial statements on a quarterly basis to make sure that the $100 million they gave us last year is being protected well. And so they're looking at how we run our developments, how we manage our properties, to make sure that if we're going to develop a property and manage it, that we're going to have the same vigilance on the syndication side, the tax credit side, to make sure that their $100 million investment is secure. And one of the items that I elaborated with the Planning Commission is that it would be very difficult for us to get more projects if we did not uphold our reputation, because it would be difficult for us to attract new equity to our company from the same people who would provide the financing for us for our own developments. We also provided references. We also provided some developments here in California for you to take a look at. And we've often been described as the Cadillac of tax credit developers. And then I think you can see, based on the other developments that we showed you, which were also tax credit developments, we spend a great deal of time making sure that our developments are amenity rich and that our folks and our tenants feel very confident living in our development. And it's also smart business sense for us. We want to keep turnover down so that we can keep the operating expenses down. So we want our tenants to be happy and to stay with us for a long time.
Thank you.
I need a little clarification. I'm the newbie on the city council, so I need a little help. Prevailing versus non-prevailing wages. I don't know if we're talking about slave labor or union or what. Help me understand that.
Yes, I mean, in layman's terms, you could describe it as a project that pays union wages versus a project that does not pay union wages. Correct.
Okay. So that would be the fundamental difference between
Correct.
the two. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, prevailing meaning union wages.
Correct.
And the prevailing wage, I understand, for this area is set in Los Angeles, so it's a very high price.
Yeah.
Help me. You want to?
One more. Tax Development Agency, is that how you describe yourself? Or your company? Yeah.
Well, we're a privately owned company.
Yeah.
So we are a tax credit syndicator.
That's it.
We
What does
are,
that mean?
That means that large banks and corporations give us hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in multifamily development, affordable multifamily development.
As opposed to?
We do all of the underwriting, and we provide guarantees to those investors that the developments are going to be operated and built as represented.
So if I understand you, you're saying you have a track record of being able to secure funding from banks for the projects you develop.
Correct. A significant track record.
Okay. Thank you.
A little bit of follow-up. I know we're making the assumption as to the difference in cost. And your project does not require for you to pay prevailing wages. Can you give me a scenario in which your project would be forced to do prevailing wages, thereby increasing it?
Okay.
What is it that we would be doing or you would be doing to actually tie your hands and force you to increase the cost because you have to do prevailing wages?
Okay. If we applied for state funds, then that would trigger a prevailing wage. There's a debate among the attorneys that I've spoken to about whether a ground lease would trigger prevailing wage or it would not trigger prevailing wage. There's an issue of it being land, you making a land contribution versus a building contribution, which you're not making a building contribution, but that land contribution leads to the building.
So is prevailing wages related to state mandates?
It is, and it also has to do with the fact that you're a redevelopment agency.
I see.
So that adds another layer of complexity to it.
And applying for the home funds through the county does not force you to pay prevailing wage?
It does not, because we're only applying for 11 units. If you apply for 11 or less units in home funds, it does not trigger prevailing wage.
Okay.
I just had a couple of questions real quick, and this is based on a comparison that was submitted to us by staff of the two projects. And I just wanted to confirm with you that as far as you are not looking at any type of agency assistance from us, other than we're talking about the property. And the other thing was that I noticed that you were talking about completion all in one phase, correct? Instead of split up into multiple phases.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Correct. Well, that's actually what we were asked to do by staff. We basically were told we want to do this in one phase. We don't have any other funds. We just have the land. And so we worked hard to make sure that we can put together a proposed development that met that criteria.
Was that a planning commission request or?
It was through meetings that we had with Jarb and Conrad.
Okay. I'm just curious why the other company didn't submit the same. But that's not a question you can answer.
They did at the beginning, and then when they come up, we can ask them why they changed it to the two phases.
From the time of approval, when you start digging dirt, how long do you project it'll take to complete the project?
If we got approval early enough so we could make the Federal Home Loan Bank application, and we would apply for tax credits, a tax credit allocation in March of next year, then we would be breaking ground sometime between September and November of next year. So basically a year from now.
And the time to complete, that's 1 year to initiate.
Correct.
And the time to completion that you'd estimate would be?
About 14, 15 months.
No other questions or comments? Okay, then I think we can move to the public hearing phase.
Okay. That means I sit down.
Yes, you can sit down, and you can be available for questions. So what I'm going to do is open the public hearing, and I have a request from Mr. Stewart to comment on this.
Good evening, City Council, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your time. Not to belabor the complexity of $22 million investments and tax exemption, I have some very minor items I'd like to bring forward more on a community level. And my comments are generic to both applications sent to the Planning Commission. I did a very short letter. In general, I'm in support of the majority of what this application represents. The areas of concern I have, well, one is ultra technical, and then a couple more global in the general plan. And the technical one is not having availability of all the plans, and I wasn't able to meet with staff, is drainage does drain from, generally speaking, from south to north in this area. After the flood of '69, it doesn't drain at all for the most part, and because of the silt that was laid in through the community. And so I'm asking that this be acknowledged that this area, this parcel that the redevelopment agency owns, does accept drainage from the adjoining properties. That needs to be maintained in perpetuity because that's the natural drainage. My concern is new developments generally result in regrading or redirection of flows. As a result, there would be a problem for all the properties between Van Leuven and this property. So it's very minor, but I didn't see that really covered. The others are more general plan oriented. It has to do with just plain circulation in the area. I included a very poorly Xerox. There was kind of a cartoon in the general plan that represented this is a large block of vacant land, including this 5 acres. There's opportunities for master planning in the community when the general plan was done. Unfortunately, the general plan did not create a general plan road that interconnects Anderson Street to Poplar Street, although it was represented. And I think we all know that Van Leuven zigzagging around the park is a bad design at best, even if he widened it, putting curb and gutter and sidewalks. And so my concern is that with this development, there is little or no land available for circulation between Poplar Street and Anderson Street with the adjoining properties. So it's more of a master planning issue. It may or may not be specific to this project, but I still think it's something that has been overlooked in the planning process as this has gone forward. And I'm very concerned didn't come up with the first development, didn't come up with the second. Now we're at the third. That's an awful lot of units being crammed into a very small area in the circulation. So that's a global. I don't know that can be resolved here at this meeting, but it's something I want the council to think of and look at as other projects come forward, especially if this doesn't proceed quickly. The other two are also a little bit technical, but both, and it's essentially we're adding a substantial number of homes, residents. The income levels are low, which means they're on foot, not in car. And we have an area of the community that hasn't had the investments made in time. City manager laid out the case very well earlier. There is no money. And my concern is that these units are coming in the old world, land residual goes down when infrastructure obligation goes up. When you ignore infrastructure obligations, you're basically raising the land residual of the property owner, the same body. So to ignore off-site conditions of approval, off-site circulation, bridges that don't meet handicap requirements, that's a real concern of mine, and I think it needs to be addressed either through this application or perhaps through the annual budgeting, that when capital improvement projects come forward, priorities have to be set, and this area needs to be given some very high priorities as we go forward. Because the dollars to fix this on that bridge, I don't know what the number is, but it probably has a bunch of commas in it, and that money could easily be diverted to other parts of the community. So I'm basically here to express for the community that isn't here in very large numbers, obviously, that this area does need to be addressed circulation-wise, infrastructure-wise, and some of those fees put back into this part of the community. So, thank you. And that goes for both projects, or any project. Thank you.
Bob,
there's a question for you.
Yeah. Help me understand circulation to Anderson a little better.
Well, Van Leuven Street currently terminates in the park, and I'm not sure the name of the street as it zigzags and it lines up with the Academy.
Right.
Orange Grove. Orange Grove.
Is that Orange Grove? A logical plan would be that Academy Way would continue in an easterly direction and intersect Poplar Street at some point. This utilizes probably the largest block of land on the Poplar Street frontage. And as a city or an agency, it would be very easily, for example, disregarding these master plans or this current plan, that if street right-of-ways were provided in part of this development, then that street alignment would be preset, whether it's built at this time or not. You would certainly have the right-of-way there for future developers, which happens to be LUAS to the west, so then they could interconnect to that street.
If we ran Academy Way directly to Poplar, that would run through private property, correct?
Yes.
So that would have to be something that we'd have to deal with.
Or developers, the landowners would put up those dedications through the condition of approval.
And if we're talking about affordable senior housing, are we anticipating there will be significant traffic, either to Anderson or any place else?
Well, it's the cumulative impact of all development. I think that's much of what Measure B was about. It's never a straw that breaks the camel's back. It's the cumulative impact. So, and it's also simple planning, is that good circulation begets a better community. This area has poor circulation due to the railroad tracks and the wash, and essentially creating some east-west links would certainly improve the neighborhoods, which is a community benefit, community-wide, not just parcel-specific.
Okay, thank you.
Let me respond on a couple of things. On the general plan circulation, the Van Leuven is proposed to extend west, go underneath Anderson Bridge, and connect it to the north-south proposed road alignment on the west road, but that's on the general plan circulation. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Don't hold your breath. Thank you.
It'll be decades.
I had a question of staff, and probably our attorney can address this, and probably Mrs. O'Cam. What is our balance in our affordable housing budget as far as how much money do we have available for affordable housing total? My memory is correct, it was in the $2 to $3 million range.
I don't have the figures right handy, but it's between 2 and 3 million for everything.
And I guess my next question is Mr. Hipsch, our RD attorney. State law asks that we use that money for affordable housing only, because that's why we charge people. My question to you is, how much leeway does the state have in giving us the ability to, or how much leeway will the state give us in maybe using some of the money to do some infrastructure improvements that Mr. Stewart referred to, as far as adding sidewalks along the rest of the roadway?
I think that both Pam O'Cam and myself are reluctant to speak to the amount of cash that's available. That's really a matter of within the purview of the finance department. And of that total, there's an amount of cash that's currently allocated to rehab programs. There's some that's used to buy covenanted houses when they come up to sale and resell those. So as far as cash, apart from those programs, I think the number, if I'm remembering correctly, is right around $1 million. Now, as far as using the money for public improvements, it's not really a matter of the state's consent in that regard. However, redevelopment law constrains public agencies in using the housing set-aside funds to I don't have the statute in front of me, but it's projects, public improvements with a very strong nexus to housing projects. So, compared to CDBG funds, for example, a municipality could look at neighborhoods, find one that was, generally speaking, a very low-income kind of area, decide it would be an improvement to the area to put in streets and sidewalks, and it could use CDBG money all day long for that. The same is not true with housing set-aside money. You'd have to have something with a direct connection to a housing project, which to me means covenanted units contemporaneous with the time that you're installing the public improvement. And even then, you'd have to take care that there's some allocation of what's benefiting the project and what's benefiting the community. So it's qualified, yes, but I wanted to
Thank you.
explain.
So then does that mean we'd have to make those infrastructure improvements at the same time as the construction, or we could do it afterwards let's say these projects go in and we want to put in curb and gutter and right down the middle of 3 affordable housing projects. Would that qualify 5 years from now?
If you want me to answer that on the record, I think it's very dubious whether it would.
So if we did it now, it would definitely be attached to the project.
If you did it contemporaneous with the project, you could support at least some level of paying for the improvements.
Okay.
Insofar as you're proposing to use housing set-aside funds for those public improvements, that's where the issue arises. If you have other funds not on the housing fund, whether they're increment or proceeds of a tax-exempt bond, you can use those, and those are not subject to that constraint.
Could I clarify something, Mr. Mayor? And that is that the project is responsible for all of the necessary street improvements as well as utility improvements in the vicinity, basically in front of the project, so that the street will match what's been done on the east side for those projects. So there is already public improvements being done for the project, just not all the way up to Redlands Boulevard and not an easterly or westerly roadway towards Anderson.
So as other projects come along, they themselves will be required to add its necessary infrastructure. Okay.
And the bridge?
Our city manager and public works director is our bridge expert. I'm going to let him do it.
Yeah, in the past, the priority was first Mountain View Avenue Bridge widening project. That was number 1 priority to the city council. And right now, since that's completed, the number 1 project is the intersection of California and Redlands Boulevard. So that's my direction. Of course, you can.
Actually, we do have Tippecanoe and Anderson, and we do have our fair share as well.
Yes, and that was funded. That one, we already have money set aside for it, and so.
Go ahead.
For potential viewers that may be watching this tonight, could you explain the RHNA allocations and why we're devoting so much energy into developing affordable housing? Okay. Good thing you came tonight.
This could be a far longer answer than you'd really like to hear. There are 2 sources, major sources of law that deal with housing production by cities and redevelopment agencies. For cities, there is a process, which is using the term charitably, for regional housing needs assessment. The state defines a state housing needs number, which it factors out to regional governments, COGs, or councils of government, including SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, which is the largest regional government, and it's the one of which Loma is a part. The COGs, each council of governments receives a number from the state and factors it out. And there's supposed to be a great deal of scholarship and demographics and economics and transportation analysis that goes into that process. I've only litigated it once. I wasn't convinced. But the state does have assigned needs through the Council of Governments to localities, and those localities are charged with planning to meet the RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment, numbers. So it's not an option for a city to say, for example, we don't think that's applicable, it doesn't suit our community's goals. You're stuck with those numbers, and you need to plan to accommodate those numbers. So in terms of the production of affordable housing units, one of the things it addresses is the so-called RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment numbers, because you're producing units, and not only are you producing them so they're initially affordable, but because they'll be subject to long-term affordability covenants during the next RHNA period and the next RHNA period, etc., they'll remain affordable. The other main source of law, just to round out the perspective, is under redevelopment law, redevelopment agencies are obliged to assure that at least 15% of all the units developed in a redevelopment project area are affordable, which again really means subject to long-term affordability covenants. Because in the private market, it would be extraordinarily rare for someone to restrict their units to affordability covenants for 45 or 55 years. Agencies in redevelopment project areas are very active in promoting that kind of housing so that the community doesn't have a deficit and doesn't get into legal complications associated with that. So there are two separate kinds of measurements for production. One's redevelopment, housing production. The other's arena. When you produce units in a project area, you address both.
Is it fair then to say that if a city has a redevelopment association or organization, that these laws apply, but if they do not, then they do not apply?
Redevelopment housing production only applies to redevelopment project areas. However, whether or not you have a redevelopment agency, let alone a project area, you will have a regional housing needs assessment number. So any city in California is going to be subject to the part of the government code that includes production of housing, regional housing needs assessments, and whether or not you have a redevelopment agency, you have those numbers.
Whether it's Beverly Hills or Loma Linda or Redlands?
Yes.
Yeah, and SCAG has assigned housing needs to communities that are completely built out. And there's no land left, and then they're required to come up with a plan in their general plan for meeting those needs, whether or not they have any land left.
That is the lament of built-out cities. The lament of the Inland Empire tends to be that while the formula is in some ways incomprehensible, the state law does seem to weight land cost as one of the important elements in how the responsibility for units is allocated, and as a result, historically, this has worked to effect a very substantial burden on Inland Empire communities.
So I turn to the city manager. If we develop this project through whichever proposal we accept, tell me where we'll be relative to our required allocation for affordable housing.
So if this project is built and completed with a 152-unit apartment, we will be in a surplus position for the low and very low income housing projects, but not the moderate income.
That's as a redevelopment agency. I don't know that that's true with respect to the RENA numbers. I have not looked at that.
In respect to what?
The RENA numbers, I have not looked at whether it would be a surplus. Those tend to be much, much larger numbers, and they are addressed over a longer period. As far as the redevelopment, affordable housing production needs of the redevelopment agency, either proposal for 152 units would leave the agency in a surplus position on very low income units, a surplus position on low income units, and it would retain a deficit on moderate income units. However, those, at least in better economic times when financing is more readily available, would be much more easy to address because the economics of those, again, if you have functioning credit markets, will more closely approximate market condition than is the case with low income or very low income.
Does RENA concern itself with affordable housing, or is it just housing? And affordable just happens to be, if it's in an RDA, 15% of it needs to be affordable.
I can address that from the general plan standpoint. The regional housing needs assessment is largely addressed in the housing element, and I think the last go-around we ended up with around 1,532 units, something like that, and then it's proportionally divided among very low, low, moderate, and I think the very low and low get the highest numbers.
In theory, under RENA, you're supposed to, under regional housing needs assessment in the general code, the government code section that requirements come from, you're supposed to provide for segments, for all economic segments of the community. That said, I've never seen a community get in trouble for providing too few mansions. What the thrust of Housing Community Development Department of the State of California, what they will care about is how you address very low income and low income in particular, and to a lesser degree, but to some degree moderate. And when we're talking about RENA numbers, typically the discussion is about the responsibility for very low-income units or low-income units that's allocated to the community. So in shorthand, when people are talking about RENA numbers, it's really those that are a bit of a chore to deal with.
Yeah, and RENA gives you credit for having adequate capacity to handle low-income units by noting that you have adequate acreage at sufficient density to actually affordably build affordable units, correct? So if you have, they require you to have a certain number of acres of 20 units per acre at least.
They will look at your community and the land use designations, and they want to see if you can get to your number. And they will also look at things, some communities, one in particular in LA County, tried to assign a very high number to some very steep slopes, and that didn't pass muster with the state. They said that's not practically developable, it's not achievable, you're going to have to go back to the drawing boards on that number.
I don't know what the definitions are, but I guess I'm a little surprised that this would put us over the hump in terms of very low and low income, but not necessarily with moderate, because I guess my perception is most of the housing in Loma Linda would be at a moderate level, so we should have a surplus there as well, but I may not understand.
But we haven't extracted any covenants from the owners that they will keep it at moderate level. See, that's what you'd have to do in order to fulfill that quota.
Yeah, one of the oddities, and we're leaving the RENA discussion back to the redevelopment discussion. In a redevelopment context, if a developer builds 100 market rate units, perfectly decent units that are not subject to any affordability restrictions, no covenants that run with the land, and the first group that buys them happens to be low income and they happen to be affordable to them, for redevelopment purposes, those units count against you. They're not in favor of you, they're not neutral, but you now owe the world 15 affordable units, of which 6 have to be affordable to very low income households, and then when you go to build 100 units, you're actually 3 units short for a quirk in the way the law is administered.
Yeah. I guess there's some people that sit in small offices that figure all this stuff out. I'll come up to speed. Thank you very much for your help.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Sacramento.
Government employees like us.
And I've been on the city council 4 years now, and I can tell you, I now understand everything Mark Hipschat says. So you too could understand this if you were up here for 4 years. Is there anybody else who would like to make comments under this public hearing? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing, and we'll move to 3B. Now, just to set the tone here for those who are watching, there are 2 competing projects for the same location and for the same desire of ours to have a senior affordable housing project. So this is the second application. For the first.
Okay, item 3B is precise plan of design number 10-78, and it is called Loma Linda Terrace. It also is senior affordable projects, and can we go back to slide 2, please? Thank you. It is on the 5.46 acre project, site that's located on the west side of Poplar. This project too is aiming for 152 units with 2 3-story buildings. The mix is just a little bit different. On this one, it's 122 one-bedroom and 30 two-bedroom. I think the other project is 120 one-bedroom and 32 two-bedroom. So they're just slightly different. This project proposes on-site management, and amenities would be a community room, recreation area, community gardens, walking paths, and I should add that the walking paths were required by the Planning Commission on this project to also have exercise stations similar to the Edison Trail that former Councilwoman Gail Hansberger was able to have put into that area. The barbecue and picnic area is also included, and professional landscaping throughout. And let's see, amenities continued, centrally located pavilion, sitting areas, outdoor sitting areas. There is a central laundry facility on each floor, education facilities for computer training, adult education services, and planned social activities. Unit amenities include all Whirlpool appliances, Energy Star, garbage disposal, HVAC, granite counters, low-pile senior-friendly carpeting, window coverings, cable TV, and high-speed internet. Next slide, please. The architecture is Mediterranean, and it does borrow elements from the existing projects on the east side of the street. They are all the same developers, so the proposal here is to tie the architecture together very closely to provide a unified architectural theme for the neighborhood. Finishes are stucco and pop-out features utilized to provide articulation and wall plane variation. The color palette also uses earth tones. Unit sizes range from 600 to 802 square feet. And as you can see, it's the same site location. Elevations for this project. Next slide, please. Here's the color board. So it's a little bit lighter, I think, than the previous development proposal. This is the site plan, and here is Building 2 and Building 1, community gardens. I think this is the outdoor barbecue area, the gazebo, and there's a fountain water feature out here, I believe. So, okay. And main driveway, and lots of walking paths throughout. As I mentioned, it will have exercise stations. Next slide, please. The landscape plan. This plan was modified after, or just before the Planning Commission meeting on June 2nd, so it was modified late May. And the Planning Commission added a condition of approval for the project that they would add additional trees and shading, particularly along the south ends of buildings, to provide some relief. So there is a condition to that effect in the project. This landscape plan does meet city requirements, and the additional landscape materials will just be further enhancement. Next slide, please. This is the two-bedroom floor plan, and you can see a living room, bedroom, bathrooms, and kitchen. Next slide, please. And the one bedroom, and with one bath, and bedroom, living room, bathroom, and kitchen. Okay. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission reviewed this project on June 2nd, and they added, as I mentioned, condition number 12, requiring more trees on the south side of the building, and the landscape plan would also be required to include bushes and shrubs along the interior property lines at 36 inches high, basically for screening purposes and to reduce light and glare from parking onto neighboring properties. People parking at night, coming up to the, facing the property line, their headlights might intrude on other properties, particularly those that face onto Van Leuven Street. Condition number 34, both projects were given this condition, different number in each set of conditions, so, and that's windows to be rated at low E or comparable to phases 1 and 2, and phases 1 and 2 for the Corporation for Better Housing, this applicant, are the east side of Poplar Street projects. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission recommendation for this project is that the Council adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve precise plan of design number 1078 based on the findings and subject to the amended conditions of approval. And the recommendation regarding the infrastructure and roadway improvements along Poplar also applies to this project, although it was made at the September 1st.
I have a question for clarification.
Yes, sir.
You refer to both projects as two buildings. I can clearly see in this particular one we're talking about that there are two separate buildings, but is there truly two separate buildings in the other project? Or is it just one long building?
The two projects actually are, the two buildings on precise plan of designs plan number 10-138 looks like it's one long building, but
Okay,
it's actually labeled as two.
I see, but it's
And-
really one building where if you start walking one, okay, and this one is two separate buildings. I'm looking at the site and that's where but I'm noticing your presentation referred to both of them as two buildings. So
Yeah.
my understanding is one is actually one building versus the other is two.
Wings of the buildings are actually labeled buildings 1 and building 2.
I see, okay.
Any other questions from the council? Now, the applicant, Corporation for Better Housing, also has a presentation, and I believe that if the council will indulge us, they'll need a couple minutes to set up.
Okay. Go ahead. Want to take a break, or?
Go ahead.
Okay.
One clarification while they're setting up. So again, just to be clear, Planning Commission did not specifically recommend one project versus the other. They've given us each developer as suitable and feasible developments pending our decision. Is that correct?
Yes, the Planning Commission looks at projects from a land use and environmental standpoint and whether it meets city requirements and code. And both projects could be approvable by the council based on the Planning Commission's review. And our direction was that we would send the projects to the City Council and that you would have the pleasure of determining which project you'd like to go with.
Thank you.
Well, would anybody like to hear from the chair of the Planning Commission? He happens to be here. Okay. Okay.
Oh, here he is.
Okay, we're ready when you are. Looks like everyone's back from the break. Go ahead.
Good evening, Charles Brumbaugh, representing Corporation Better Housing and the development team associated with the proposed project number, I can't recall. But we had applied in, I think it was February of this year for the project, and the committee, executive committee for affordable housing, I believe, authorized us to apply to the county for home funds in March. And so we're the first applicant, and then, as I see it, the city wanted a second opinion. And I like that. I appreciate that. I appreciate competition. Just to give you a little background, many of you are familiar with our work. Some of you are newer to the council. In early 2005, we came to the city council with a project very, very different than the one that's ultimately built, the Phase 1 project right there. Originally, the staff and council directed us to do basically a mixed income project. There would be 44 units of affordable housing on the north edge of the property, condominiums along the southerly portion, but on the front, the southwest portion, and then some single-family homes in the back. I believe in about 2006, Prop V was passed, the small lot ordinance. Is that correct?
Measure B.
Measure E. And so that project was put on hold for quite some time. The city had to sort out what was going on. We eagerly awaited to develop that parcel, but unfortunately there was massive delays. In February 2008, the city called us and said, we would like you to start the first phase project. And we said, great. In fact, if we could go really fast, there is a funding source available, which was the MHP program with the state. And I came before you in late February and said, if you, as a council, are willing to trust us, believe in us, approve this really fast with virtually no planning commission interaction, we can apply in March and be under construction in 5 or 6 months. We applied in March, got the award, and we're under construction in October. With an underground garage, we constructed those 44 units just over 12 months. It was almost 13 months. We think we did a great job. About a year, 6 months later, the city invited us to do the second phase, which is this parcel here. It's kind of set up for a street view. This is one side and this is the other side of the street. And we came in, we spent more time vetting this project than the first one, went to the Planning Commission, got some interaction with the Planning Commission, and we believe we're developing a wonderful project. Project did have some minor delays with the tax credit and financing environment the way it was. We originally proposed the project with substantially less governmental assistance, and unfortunately the tax credit values went down in the marketplace and we had to garner additional financing sources, which triggered prevailing wages, and so we could talk more about that. In January, we received an award through the state for supplemental gap financing through the federal government that was handled through the state. So this project then was on track. We got an affordable housing grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank, and we filled the gap. We did not ask the city for additional resources. We knew that the city's resources were limited, and so this project is now well underway. As of today, we're framing it. So that project should be done in about 8 months. The third phase project, we have been talking with the city for quite some time about, and the city asked us to design and propose senior housing because we've done 160 family housing units across the street. We'd also looked at a piece of property over Redlands and is it Mission, over in the far corner of the city. And that site just didn't work out for a number of reasons. I won't bore you with the details, but it didn't fit the tax credit program very well. So we went through the Planning Commission, a couple of planning commissions actually. The project was vetted. We talked a great deal about the site plan. As you can see, their site plan is very similar to ours. The only material difference in our mind is the southerly entrance is slightly north of theirs. It's just a staff recommendation to line that up with the driveway on our Phase 2 project across the street. Other than that, there's some minor differences, and if you'd like to talk about those, we can, but in my view, they're fairly similar. In essence, really, I think tonight, if I was the council, I'd be interested in figuring out which project, as proposed, is the one that's most likely to be done, to be constructed as promised, and to be done in the constraints of what the developer is telling you. Richmond Group showed a lot of pretty pictures. They did. They're very pretty. They've done a lot of good work in the East Coast. Pam, as I understand it, moved out here a few years ago to start up a division. Perfectly okay. But California is a lot different than developing on the East Coast. Just is. Just yesterday, well, Friday at 6 o'clock, but yesterday we received word from the Tax Credit Allocation Committee that a project to be funded like this needs a tiebreaker, which basically the long and short of that is there's a beauty contest at the state of who can give back the most tax credits and ask for the least amount of tax credits and get all the other governmental agencies to give you as much money as possible so they can give you as little money as possible. And that's really the trick. That's how you get projects done in California. You have to understand the 9% tiebreaker. I sat here tonight and saw them propose 152 units with virtually no governmental assistance. Could that be done theoretically? Absolutely. Absolutely could be done. It will not be successful in the tax credit program in the state of California. It will not. That is precisely why we broke this into 2 phases. You do not have sufficient governmental subsidies and assistance to get funded. It's just that simple. The most recent tax credit awards at 104 and 108 on a tiebreaker, a $20 million project, you would need to give back approximately $6 million in tax credits, and you would need approximately $7 to $8 million of governmental assistance to get funded. We did some research in a day, the best we could, to come here tonight to give you the facts. The first project is in Lake Elsinore. It's 113 units done by Bridge Housing, which is a very large affordable housing developer in California, very reputable. They had $1 million of a Hope 6 grant from the city, $4 million in land and other governmental assistance from the city, and $440,000 from the county. And that didn't get funded the first time. they had to go back to the agency and ask for more money because they didn't have enough subsidy. And that subsidy is vastly larger than the subsidy that the Richmond Group is telling you they can get their project done with. It's just not possible. Second project is in Paris. It's done by AmCal, also another very legitimate California affordable housing developer. We do not have all the details on that, but we are under the impression that the city issued $7.5 million of bonds to provide governmental assistance for that project, and unfortunately, we couldn't confirm that, but we believe that to be true. It's the best information we have. Because of the tax credit program in California, we do not see any way presently to get 152 units funded in one phase. It's just not feasible. We'd love to. It makes more sense for us. It's easier, economics of scale, easier for the city. We only have to go through the process once. It's easier for everybody. It's just not reality. And we feel as, well, first of all, we feel like we're partners with you. We have a 75-year land lease on the second phase. We have 60-year land lease on the first phase. We're going to be in this community, and Justin will be able to talk more about what we're doing in the community already in our first phase as far as social services and other things. I don't want to leave you with the impression that I'm up here telling you that the Richmond Group is bad or trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I don't believe that to be true. I don't want you to think that, you know, I'm throwing stones at my competition. I just believe, and I've done a lot of deals with Mark Hips, she'll tell you, I'm a straight shooting guy. Might not be the most articulate, whatever, but I'm just going to tell you the way it is. And I just can't sit here and tell you that I can do something. I can't. Just can't do it. It's just not the way I was raised, and I know this program. I've done nothing in my life for the last 15 years but develop affordable housing in California. I know the program in and out. I can sit here and give you whatever analysis you'd like. I haven't seen their numbers other than what was up there tonight. I tell you that they don't make sense to me, but I can't tell you in detail what the problems are without seeing them. Justin, you want to talk briefly?
Justin Hart, Corporation for Better Housing. As Mr. Brumbaugh had indicated, that we've got our two developments that have been approved, and one is currently under construction, Loma Linda Commons, and our Poplar Street apartment is currently under operations. As indicated earlier, Corporation for Better Housing is a long-term partner with the City of Loma Linda and the Loma Linda Redevelopment Agency. Over the last 5 or some odd years, we've been working with both city staff and agency and council members to develop affordable housing for those that are in need of the affordable housing. And we feel like we've been really developing strong roots in the community, strong ties in the community. And we've been bringing those ties into the community through our social services that we're currently running at our Poplar Street apartments. We opened at the end of 2009 and we're fully occupied in a brief few months. We currently are running several social services through our social services coordinator at Corporation for Better Housing, as well as our on-site management. As a brief side note, we were fortunate enough to hire I would like to say, overqualified on-site manager, Brandy Johnson, at our site, with the hopes and belief in her that she'd be able to run the 120 units as well. She comes from a very strong background and has really demonstrated herself as a very capable and strong on-site manager, someone who really wants to become part of the community at large and also the community at hand, develop and help kind of shape a neighborhood, kind of lift it back up into an area where we all want it to be. We're currently running or partnering up with several community groups. We're partnered up with the San Bernardino Adult School, the Center for Employment, for job training for our on-site residents. Again, these are all free social services that our residents can participate in if they would like to. We recently just had a neighborhood safety meeting held by the County Sheriff's Department. Sylvia Beasley ran that, and we had a great turnout as well, really to kind of, again, bring the sense of community to that development. We're also partnered up with Water of Life Church to provide which will be providing a mobile medical unit for blood pressure, glucose checks, immunizations, as well as Loma Linda Pediatric and the Inland Empire Community Health Care Center, who will also provide other services off-site. We've also partnered up with the Loma Linda University to provide after-hours or after-school classes for on-site residents. Currently, it's in operations, I believe, from about 2:30 to 4:30, 5 days a week, where our residents can utilize the community room that we have in the computer center, learning center that we've developed. Again, bringing these amenity-rich items in our first phase will obviously serve as a great springboard to helping more individuals that are in our second phase. And, as we build more momentum in the community, we'll be able to parlay that into, a potential third phase of with our seniors.
And if I may follow up, Justin just recently attended a conference that the County of San Bernardino put on for mental health funding source that we are seeking, and I'll get into how that source is the source that actually triggers prevailing wage, and I can go into that in some detail. But the county has informally announced the fact that it will not give you home funds or allocate home funds to a project unless you couple that with their mental health program. That's why we went to the forum, the workshop, the mandatory bid conference is, I believe, what they called it. If you did not go, you will not be eligible to apply for the mental health, and we are being told that you will therefore be precluded from getting home funds from the county this round, which we're being told is in mid-October. The applications will be announced for a request for proposals in October, and then sometime in November that window will close. In addition, the Richmond Group indicated that they would be applying for an affordable housing grant through the Federal Home Loan Bank. It's a fairly standard funding source for the industry. What they failed to tell you is you get 5 points if you're a nonprofit. They are not. You typically will lose by a quarter point, a half point, 3/4 of a point. 5 points is light years apart. We've received $28 million, $27 million, $27 million over approximately 40 affordable housing grants from the Federal Home Loan Bank for California developments. I would venture a guess they haven't received one for California. They also showed you some pictures earlier of California projects. I don't believe she said that they were their developments because, to the best of my knowledge, they haven't developed any new construction projects in California. I believe they've done 2 rehabilitation projects. It's the best information I have. So they have very, very limited experience in California, and I believe that's why they fundamentally don't understand how to get a 9% tax credit project funded in California. And I apologize for getting up here and telling you they unfortunately are I don't know exactly what words to use, but I'm just going to tell you the way I see it. I'll just leave it at that. And that's the way I see it. We have a lot of advantages because we're an affordable, nonprofit California developer that they don't have the same opportunities we do to gather additional revenue sources.
Just as a quick follow-up, I just wanted to point out also that our Loma Linda Commons phase, our second phase, has County of San Bernardino home funds associated with that for $2 million. We've worked with the county and we've learned their processes and have worked with them throughout that process. So.
It also has a $1 million affordable housing grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank in San Francisco. And Justin, what we got, 400 grand, 500 grand on the first one? 608,000 on the first one. So we would love to entertain questions. Apologize for maybe speaking too long. Had a lot to say. I have some other exhibits and stuff, but I know I've been going on too long. So if you have any further questions.
I have several questions. You referred to your second project as the one that forced you to do prevailing wages. What specifically in it, the one that's under construction, required that you do prevailing wages?
The second one and the third one.
Not the third one, but the second one.
The second one, 1702 of the Labor Code of California requires the payment of prevailing wage if state funds or federal funds are administered through the state to a project. The second project received funds under the Revitalization Act of 2009 or whatever, the Stimulus Act. That act called for the payment of federal prevailing wages. The state actually tagged on state prevailing wages when they loaned us the money and triggered the higher payment of state prevailing wages or Davis-Bacon. So in addition to paying an additional 22 or 23%, it actually required us to pay about 26 or 27 because you go line by line. If drywall is higher in the state, you pay the state wage. If carpentry is higher in the federal wage, then you pay the federal wage. So you're taking the greater of the two programs.
Okay. And I think you referred to it earlier that what's forced you to do in this case is you're applying for those MHC funds.
That's correct.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm clear with that. The other question I had was, you have two buildings, correct, in your project. Do you consider one as phase one and the second one as phase two?
Yes.
Okay. Because I guess I'm a little confused. I'm looking at what you provided us in the staff report, and one building has 69 units, and the other one has 83. So even though they look similar, there's significant difference in the number of units.
If you want to use the word significant, okay. The building on the front that has the street frontage is proposed to be the first phase.
Okay, I see. And what was provided to us in the staff report, when it came to financing for your phase two, I see a lot of to be determined, and that was provided to us on Thursday, and then we were given a sheet recently where you determined what that cost was. So basically in the last 3 days you determined what the cost was and what you're asking from us?
We were under the impression that the city had $1 million to put into an affordable housing project on the project site.
Okay.
We therefore, based on our experience in California, backed into the number of units that we could come here tonight and tell you we have a reasonable chance of success in getting funded, and that number was 83 units. That's how we did that. Staff followed up with an email saying, could you please provide detail on your second phase financing sources? Those, I would tell you, are the best estimates that we have at the present time.
Okay, that's fine. And then you talked about the fact that you're fairly certain that the county folks will not issue home funds unless you're applying it in conjunction with the HMC funds. Do you have a letter? Do you have something other than you telling us that that's what the requirement is? Because I think that would be appreciative.
No, I don't.
Okay. And I also noticed there's a you determined that the agency's land's worth $2.5 million, and the phase two is worth another $2 million, which brings you up to $4.5 million. I have not seen an official appraisal from you showing me how you reached those numbers.
Okay, we have that
you
here.
You do have that.
If you'd like to see that, we can provide it to you right now.
And then one last question. from what staff is showing us and from what I'm looking at your project, you refer to having an exercise facility. I'm having a hard time identifying where that is in your project. Can you show me where that is?
It may not be on the site plan. We were issued a condition of approval from the Planning Commission, or recommendation, to design some passive and active exercise
would be
activities.
outside.
Do we have?
We've got that located right here.
I
and
see.
it's the outdoor.
Okay. So it's an outdoor exercise. Okay.
Correct. You've got one there located, and here located as well.
Okay, that's it.
And that would get more developed as we build. That was just a condition that the Planning Commission made a recommendation, so I apologize, I didn't realize we even got it on the site.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I want to commend you on your participation in developing projects in the city of Loma Linda. I think that relationships are important. I appreciate that. Having said that, I don't want to mischaracterize what you just said, but most of what I heard was that you've got reality lenses on and understand the state of California and how to succeed in these kinds of projects, and Richmond Group is questionable. What I'm more interested in hearing, and you know, I have no way of judging to what extent that's accurate and not accurate. I take your word for it. What I'm more interested in hearing from you is to differentiate your project from the Richmond project that you saw, and I think Pam needs to get the opportunity to do the same thing. What attributes and strengths does your project bring that are noteworthy?
Our project is designed to succeed. We will get this project built. As you can see right in front of me, we have a color board. Unfortunately, the projects are virtually identical. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there are huge differences. They have a pool and we don't. We have a pavilion and they don't. I appreciate the question, and that was something I was contemplating earlier, and I actually took some notes of what Pam said, and they're virtually identical projects. She's going to tell you that she has balconies and we don't. I can tell you why we don't do balconies. We used to. Unfortunately, we have no control over the FCC, and a lot of little cable dish TV antennas get put out there, and there's things that get put out there that we don't have control over, and we've decided as an organization that balconies are not the best use of public resources for an affordable housing project. We've done balconies on a number of projects. If the city feels that it's an important attribute, we'd be more than happy to add them. It's not a financial thing as much as a street scene. I don't think you want to drive down Poplar and see a bunch of dishes hanging off the front balcony, and we can't stop that. I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't.
If you're the management, if you manage the apartments, why can you not limit? I mean, you can have.
Yeah, no, there's federal and state laws that prohibit it.
Okay.
So if you don't give them the opportunity, then they can't do it. But once you give them the opportunity, they'll do it.
Ron, it gets into, I think, the expectation that you have the right to choose between cable and satellite providers, and I think the problem is there were a lot of apartment complexes and other places that were prohibiting that, and so cable was kind of getting the dominant.
Let me ask thank you, Phil. Two other specific questions. Two of the things that I see as significant is one, you're providing a central laundry service on each floor, and the other project would provide hookups within each facility, each apartment.
Yes.
I would be more attracted to having my own laundry available to me if I needed to. Is there a reason that you chose to go with a central laundry?
Our experience is that it's very expensive to provide washers and dryers, which I understand they're not. But if you're going to ask somebody on fixed income that's making $10,000 a year and they're paying $400 rent to go spend $700, $800, $900, $1,000, $1,100 to buy a washer and dryer, I don't think that's going to happen. So we provide central facilities for our tenants. The other issue that we have is if you were to put an up-down washer and dryer, that's not ADA compliant because a person in a wheelchair can't reach the top. So we would have to have a central laundry facility anyways. So to duplicate the services we didn't feel would be prudent.
So if I'm handicapped, you are required to have laundry facilities that are accessible to me, not just hookups.
Well, if you provide the hookup, then they could go out and buy their own washer and dryer.
Right.
But if you were to do a stackable, which the space that they're providing for it, you'd have to do a stackable, or there is now a new washer and dryer single unit that we actually went out and bought one, and we tested it, and it takes 2.5 hours to dry your laundry.
How much are they?
$800 plus delivery plus tax.
What about the pool? We live in Southern California.
Yes.
If I'm retired, I want to be able to swim to get exercise.
You know, that sounds great. We have a project in Temecula, just down the road. There's a pool there. The city wanted us to put in a pool. They provided additional resources to build the pool. We get 1 or 2 people a week using it.
Do you plan any activities?
Well, we tried. As a nonprofit, you know, we run lots of different programs in the project, and it just didn't seem to be something that they were overly interested in doing.
Thank you.
I'm not saying it's a bad
I want to
amenity. It's just our experience is it's not used very often.
Thank you.
just want to get a clarification. What was in front of us shows balconies, but you're telling me that your project will not have balconies.
They're false balconies.
Oh, I see.
It's an architectural facade.
Gives you the impression it's a balcony. I see.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just
Thank
to give the street scene, the articulation of the building.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for you. In the event that the customers there chose to, say, go with satellite TV service, would you provide that type of, like a master dish somewhere where they could get that type of thing, or no?
That's what we're working on, yeah. We've been trying to get a master program developed. This all occurred in 2005 in our project in Westminster, when we built fairly large balconies, and the community of Westminster has a large Asian population that the cable stations weren't the type of stations that they were interested in viewing, and so the project became littered. And over the last few years, we've been working with, I forget which, it's not DirecTV, but it's one of their competitors, to design a master dish on the roof. And we have a design that we think will work, but we've not yet been able to get them to agree to it.
Yeah, I know they exist, just I don't think it's anything new because the county jails have those, so, and they've been around for a while.
Yeah.
Couple of questions for you. You talked about the mental health program for the county. Can you elaborate on that, exactly what it is? I have an interest in that.
The County of San Bernardino Department of Behavioral Services, I believe it's called, was allocated a certain amount of funds from the state, and they have put out basically a over-the-counter RFP that would lend itself to new developments, and that's the program. It's the MHSA, Mental Services Health Agency, that's allocating these funds, and that's the department that we went to.
Okay, you told us that getting the county money would be contingent on being part of this mental health program. Now, I just want to be clear, we're not talking about having like a group home type of facility here. We're not lending ourselves towards providing those type of services here in the city. We're looking for senior affordable housing. So I'm not exactly certain where mental health plays into this, so I'm asking for some clarification on that.
Well, the MHSA department, they have basically we would allocate a certain, a handful of units to individuals that are working with the county for, that are part of the MHSA program.
For transitional housing for mental health
No,
patients?
this is permanent housing. These are for people that have post-traumatic syndrome from, it would be a senior development, so it would be from maybe previous, events that, maybe people that were in the Army or armed or military, they would qualify as part of that service as well.
And you're telling us, and because we're kind of new to this, but that is a requirement to get county money?
It's been suggested that it is a priority.
Okay. And then you talked about some of your social services. Were there any other ones other than the ones you mentioned, having neighborhood watch meetings and things like that? Were there anything else that, as far as social services that you provide?
Well, that's the social services list that's currently ongoing right now, but we're constantly working with our on-site manager and the on-site residents to, develop other, targeted programs, depending on where funding is available within the county or within other areas as well.
Okay. I just like to hear specifics, like we have meetings on Tuesday for, quilting. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm just looking for specifics because you tell me we develop programs. I just don't.
We have these after school every day from 2:30 to 5, 2:30 to 4:30, 5 times a week with the Loma University. They come out to our site. We also have, with other than partnering with outside groups, we run, potluck dinners. We run movie nights.
Okay.
And we actually provide every month a newsletter to the residents outlining what activities will be taking place on what particular dates.
I got you. Thank you. And
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
No, just because I do have questions for Pam too. So.
How many facilities do you run with these kinds of programs?
Which type of program?
The
mental health?
social-related programs that Councilman Duper is asking you about.
Every one of our projects has.
How many is that?
44 projects.
And is that all senior housing or?
It's about, out of the 3,300, we have about 850 or 900 seniors and about 2,300 family units.
So when you talk about collaborating with Loma Linda Pediatrics, you're talking about the 2,200, not the 8 or 9.
Oh, I'm sorry. I completely misunderstood your question. In each community where our project is located, we go out into the community and determine what other agencies we can work with to provide social services to that community's development. So I apologize. I completely misunderstood your question. It's completely related to where the project is located.
And you also made a comment earlier that from your understanding, the Richmond Group has only done renovation projects in the state of California and has not developed new projects. Is that correct?
That was a qualified statement to the best of my knowledge after talking with a number of lender partners that we have that I'm sure it's a big industry because there's lots of dollars, but it's a small industry because everybody does business with the same people for the most part. So we went out and talked to as many people as we could. We researched the state of California's website for tax credits. We did, basically that's what we did. Because I just have never heard of them. Earlier I told you Bridge Housing, AmCal, there's 20 or 30 organizations that routinely do affordable housing developments in California. And I know who the Richmond Group is. I met with them 12, 14 years ago. They wanted to buy my tax credits. I mean, I've known them forever. We haven't done any business with them. But I believe, and I've been told that they're a very legitimate organization. I have nothing to say bad about their syndication and tax credit program. I just question their ability to get an affordable housing development done in California. And I'm sorry, I hope it's not coming off as being callous or blunt or whatever it is. You're my partner. I'm your partner. I'm here telling you the facts. I know it's a very hard decision you have to make. You have staff. You have agency counsel. I welcome their input. If there's something that I misspoke, then I shouldn't get the project. It's just that simple. I'm not going to, if you feel that I misled you, please. I don't want the project.
Just a couple of questions on the project design.
Yes.
You have an area called a covered work area?
Yes.
What exactly is that for?
Working with staff, we had the raised planters. We're going to do them in concrete, and they're going to be about 4 feet tall, so the seniors don't have to bend over. So we're building planters that they can plant roses or vegetable gardens or whatever. And it was recommended to us, I believe maybe at the Planning Commission, Mr. Rojas said, or somebody said, wouldn't it be nice if there was an area that they could go into the shade and get out of the sun for a little bit and then go and tend to their rose bushes or whatever after, taking a few-minute break. So that's why we did that.
And then real quick, the other thing was on their project, it's fenced in. Is yours fenced in?
Yeah, I believe that's a requirement for both projects.
I hear you mention it when you're going over the site.
Yeah. Again, typically we would do a block wall, but as I understand it, the flow of water, the natural flow in Darby, we can work with you on that. And if we have to pick up a catchment basin or whatever, it's not unusual to have a water course problem through a project.
It was notable on the other project simply because it is a requirement and they didn't note it on their plans. But they were more than willing, and I think they probably did intend to put fencing around the outside of their...
Yeah. The project right there, as indicated, has wrought iron along the bottom. All those little dots with a line through it, it's wrought iron fence on the bottom.
Is there anything more? We still need to do a public...
One or two questions. Back to the financial structure, that's still a little puzzling to me, why there seems to be such a wide spread of perception as far as financing, need for prevailing wages. Do you agree that it's a fair characterization that the biggest difference in construction cost is simply that need for prevailing wages?
Without question. I would probably tell you within 2 or 3% our construction costs would be approximately the same. One point to that, we could not apply for the mental health and therefore maybe not even get the county home funds. The problem is the way the tax credit program works is the greater your project costs, the more you spend and the more governmental assistance and the more tax credits you give back, the more likely it is you'll win. And I know that's a bizarre concept and it's counterintuitive, but in California, the greater your project costs, as long as you can get it, it's the government and nothing personal. The more you spend and the more you create other sources of revenue, the more likely it is that you'll win. The 2 projects that got funded, I would venture a guess they're both prevailing wage. I know one of them is because it has a Hope 6 fund. That's a federal program that's got to pay prevailing wages. That's a project that won. There is a formula. You just have to know what it is.
Just to follow up to that question, again, I indicated I value your record in our community, and I do think you've had a very well-deserved reputation as a result of that. But you mentioned the value of competition. Isn't the ultimate value and final competition to let someone else see and show to us what they can do? I understand your concerns. I looked to staff, I looked to our legal experts, I looked to others that have done due diligence. So far, I haven't heard anyone say that the competing proposal is not feasible. There's anything problematic with the developer other than your characterization. So I'm left with that tension that I'm still looking for additional information, and I'd like to hear that from staff. Put them on the spot, then it's a tough dilemma that I think we as council has. But I guess to get away from the preamble and to a direct question, why not try something new and have a little competition here?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with competition. I view competition as the person that has the best project should win. That's my interpretation of competition. And I unequivocally sit here tonight and tell you we have the best project. And in large part, it's because we can get it done. It's just that simple.
Had just a couple quick questions. One related to financing. You said that you broke it in two because that increases your chances of getting all the finances you needed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if the other folks broke it in two, they would probably increase their chances as well, right?
But that's not their proposal.
They could make it if they had to, right? Well, we'll ask them. But anyway,
But is that competition where, there's lots of things, and we could reduce it to 60 units and have a greater chance. I'm hoping you're going to vote on what's in front of you tonight, not take my ideas, give it to them, and give them the money.
Except for the fact that when it was presented in front of us, originally their project was in two phases. The staff said you need to put it in one. Yours was in one phase, and then you split it in two. So you guys flip-flopped. As to reasoning, I think it's up to us to decide as to which one we feel is, most likely going to get funding. Back to the project, your project specifically, help me find, and it's probably there, but I'm not seeing it. Yours is a 3-story building. Am I missing where the elevators are?
There are 2 elevators.
Okay.
How does this work? Right there.
Okay.
Is the first elevator right as you come in the front door.
I see. Okay. It's just, I guess it's not labeled on here. Okay.
Yeah. The X would be indicative of an elevator. I apologize for that.
That's okay. No problem. And I do want to echo the sentiments of some of the other council members. We do appreciate the fact that you have 2 projects, Loma Linda, and we're very happy with those. So that in no way indicates our displeasure with your corporation in any way, in the fact that we're wanting to give an opportunity for someone else to present. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Whatever happens tonight, I appreciate the opportunity. We will be your neighbor for a long time. I apologize for having to come in here and maybe being a little harsh, but I believe very strongly in competition. I'm a very competitive person, and it's just my nature, and maybe because I'm formally trained as an attorney, to maybe, take the bull by the horns. But I just can't sit here in good conscience and tell you I'm going to do 153 units in one phase and get it funded. I'm not.
That's fine. Thank you.
On the 2-phase project, will one phase be occupied while the second phase is being worked on? How does that work?
That could be a potential, yes. In the community of Oakley in Northern California, it's interesting because when we were driving down tonight, we did a calculation. At full build-out, these 3 projects would be 316 units. We have exactly 316 units in 4 phases of development in the city of Oakley. We are going to probably have an additional 2 or 3, maybe 4 more phases there, because we're going to have to break those into smaller projects too. We originally were going to do 2 or 3 phases, and because of the changes in the program, the last project we just got funded is 44 units of senior project, because that's what will work. That's what got funded. The previous projects before that were greater. The first project was 208 units, and we had to downsize from there, and we've been downsizing every year since then because of the changes. But we do phase projects all the time. We just did one in Los Banos. We're doing one in Chowchilla. It's very common in the industry to do a project 70, 80, 90 units. 153 units is a fairly large 9% program project. It's just on the outer limits, and because of the constraints, I just don't think it's feasible.
Okay, can we do our public hearing? I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Mr. Stewart's comments carry forward from the last. Okay, seeing no comments, the public hearing is closed. What would the council like to do? Would you like to bring up the Richmond group?
What I'd like to do is
perhaps that would be better to do first, but I want to hear from the chair of our planning commission as well.
Okay, I'm sure he's here somewhere behind one of these. He said he wanted to hear from you.
But why don't we hear from
Wherever you
Richmond?
are.
Let's hear from Richmond first, and then we'll hear from planning commission.
Yeah, just set it down there.
Would you like for me to respond to some of the statements that were made, or do you want to ask me questions?
Well, you can start with a response to statements, and then if you miss any, we'll remind you.
Okay, great. We have developed in California, we've developed about 15 projects throughout the state over the last 7 or 8 years. As a syndicator and a developer, we typically do not put our name, the Richmond Group, as the applicant name. We typically put in a single purpose entity for that particular development. But if you were to look at the actual 9% applications for the developments that we have produced in California, you would see the Richmond Group name mentioned. There was an item, I believe, about the tiebreaker. I want to clarify the tiebreaker. And yes, I personally, just like all affordable housing developers in California, are painfully aware of the 9% tax credit process. We live or die based on that process. So that is the one thing you need to know in and out in order to determine for yourself whether you have a project that's going to be competitive in the next round. Our tiebreaker for the project that we proposed and the numbers that you have in front of you was between the successful tiebreakers of the projects that were funded in the Inland Empire for the last round. And Charlie is absolutely correct. I think as an industry, we were all surprised yesterday as the numbers were released for the second round as to the tiebreakers for how high the tiebreakers were for the Inland Empire. They actually jumped significantly even for the not-for-profit set aside. They're even higher than the Inland Empire. So if you applied as a not-for-profit, you would need even more subsidy or reduce your costs in order to get a higher tiebreaker, as opposed to applying for the Inland Empire geographic area. And the tiebreaker actually is not just about subsidy. So it's actually a calculation of two things. It's your subsidy over your total development cost. And then what the state did last year is they wanted to make sure that people simply weren't pumping up their costs just to get higher subsidy numbers. They actually are penalizing you for having such high costs. So the second calculation in the tiebreaker actually forces you to make sure that your project is not excessive in terms of your overall costs. So it's actually a two-pronged approach in calculating your tiebreaker. It's not simply about the subsidy. And I'm not sure what else there was that I needed to address.
Up-down washer dryers, ADA compliant.
Oh, yeah, we have stackable washer dryers in other senior developments. You know, we always have our architects check on the latest lawsuits against management companies or developers with respect to ADA. And they felt comfortable that stackable washer dryers would be fine for a senior development.
So other than you assuring us you're going to get the funding, what other insurance do we have other than the resume you provided of us? Because he categorically says there's no way you guys are going to get the funding. I mean, what else? How do I decide as to who's telling the truth?
Well, I'm not really sure how to answer that because these kinds of conversations, you know, I would describe this as, you know, seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak. These kinds of conversations are normally taking place between the developer and the staff. We can't control what the tiebreakers are. We can't predict what the tiebreakers are in the next round. We can research what cities have dedicated in subsidy money for other developments. That development may or may not apply in the next round depending on what's happening with that particular development. But we would serve as partners in determining when it would make sense to apply in that particular round. There's a sense throughout the state that at some point the tiebreakers need to come down because cities don't have a lot of subsidy money anymore. And what's happening is a lot of the projects from the past few years are making their way through the pipeline. So what you're seeing are projects that have been around from '08, from '09, some even as far back as '07. And cities had more money during those years to dedicate to those particular developments. So those projects are making their way through the pipeline. So you are seeing higher tiebreakers, but at some point those need to come down. But I will say it's absolutely true that the numbers that you have in front of you, our tiebreaker is competitive. It was within the tiebreaker ratios of the projects that were funded in the Inland Empire in the first round of this year.
Have you gotten any communication from the county stating that you're only going to get home funds if you apply for the
I have
HNC?
not. No, I have not. And home funds, in order to get home funds, each county needs to publish a consolidated plan. So that consolidated plan was published, I believe, a year or so ago. So that consolidated plan dictates what their priorities are. And I mean, as an entity that's looking to do development with the County of San Bernardino, I mean, that is a document that you would research as an affordable housing developer. I did not see anything in that consolidated plan that indicated a priority or a preference for projects for mental health patients.
How many home funds have you received from other counties in the past?
Throughout the country or in the state?
In the state of California.
In the state of California, we received from 9 different counties.
Okay. But not yet from San Bernardino?
Not yet from San Bernardino.
Okay. All right.
No.
Would you like to talk about any of the design differences between your design and their design? Use of space, amenities, social projects, any of that type of stuff as spoken to by their side?
Right. Well, I think the architecture is visually more interesting. I also think the overall feel of the development, it has more amenities, more amenity abundant. It's an amenity-rich development. We have a central fitness center. We have a library. We have a business center. We have a club room. We have a pool. We have outdoor activity areas such as the bocce ball court. As an affordable developer in California, we're all required to provide services on site. So that is something that we are required to do by the state. In other states where we are not required to do so by the agency, we do provide those. Our management company does that as a standard service to the residents.
How many units in your project actually have real balconies, not fake?
I would say most.
So they're balconies you can actually put a chair on or just stand?
Right. And I certainly understand where he's coming from in terms of concern over, them not looking so kept up. But that's where strong management comes into play. We have strong rules about making sure that people aren't hanging, blankets out or clothes to dry, those kinds of things.
Would you like to speak about the differences in your project as far as the phases? And
well, our project proposes one phase. It's not divided into phases.
And your belief on that?
Our belief on that is because we looked at the tiebreakers for the projects that were funded in the first round. And our costs and the subsidy that we're looking for created a competitive tiebreaker so that we were assured that we could get funded in the next tax credit round.
Yeah, getting credit for the affordability of it as opposed to the subsidized nature of it.
Correct, that our costs are lower. So that helps raise your tiebreaker score.
Do you believe that your score would improve if you broke it into 2 phases and spent another $10 million?
I don't think I need to spend $10 million more dollars. I think I would just simply get more subsidy funds and be able to reduce the tax credit request, which would raise the tiebreaker score. But I don't believe I need to spend $10 million more dollars.
But you could break your project into two phases?
We could break it up into 2 phases, certainly.
What's your comment on the Federal Home Loan Bank and the not-for-profit extra 5 points?
Well, we do have a not-for-profit that's in our ownership entity, so we would score those points. It's also based on whether you have a nonprofit in your ownership structure, how much they participate in the development, how much of a developer fee they get as a total percentage, and how much of the cash flow that nonprofit developer would get.
So you would get the full 5?
We would get the full points. And we've looked at the Federal Home Loan Bank applications that were funded in the April round to make sure that our score for this proposed development would be competitive.
I'm going to finish my checklist. Does anybody have any other?
Mr. Stewart raised an issue regarding drainage. Has that been factored into your plans?
That's something that we would work with the city staff about to address any concerns with respect to drainage. We haven't gotten to that level of civil engineering on the documents.
Standard not to be to that level yet at this phase? Okay. Okay. Any other questions for her?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there a sir rebuttal or a re?
You wanted to hear from the planning chair or something, or?
Well, maybe we can do a sir rebuttal.
I appreciate that. Just to follow up, she's indicated the Richmond Group's name would appear in the tax credit application. Yeah, it probably appears as a tax credit syndicator. If they are the developer, the tax credits get awarded to the developer. That would be Corporation of Better Housing or the Richmond Group, the LLC group, whatever Pacific Development LLC. She just, I guess, got up here and told you she's not going to apply as the Richmond Group LLC, but as some nonprofit. Well, okay, but what's the story with the nonprofit? Because the only way you get 5 points under the Affordable Housing Program and from the state, or the 11th District in San Francisco, is if it's solely a nonprofit development. That's how you get 5 points. If it's a joint venture, you don't get 5 points. And so I'm not quite sure what she's saying there. She also indicated that if we were to apply, we would have to apply in the nonprofit and not in the geographic set-aside. That's fundamentally incorrect. We have 2 chances to win. They have 1. If we were to apply in the nonprofit set-aside and not win, then we would fall down into the geographic set-aside. They indicated that they got home funds in 9 counties. I would invite you to ask her which counties, and was it the Richmond Group that actually got those funds? Because we've gotten, how much, 40 million, 50 million in home funds? Throughout the state, we've received many, many awards of home funds every single time to the Corporation of Better Housing, just like we received from Corporation of Better Housing in the second project. Thank you.
Chair of the Planning Commission, if you'd like to make some comments.
If I'd like to make some comments, or I've been requested.
You don't have to if you don't want.
I think it's important, again, I guess for the record, my name is John Nichols, Chairman of the Planning Commission. Sort of speak from, both my Planning Commission hat as well as just an architect and a citizen of Loma Linda. I think Deb stated it at the outset, the Planning Commission struggles regularly with our role and responsibility from an objective standpoint, falling within the purview of what the council's asked the Planning Commission to do, and then from a subjective standpoint about, our likes and dislikes of projects and issues that come before us. And we constantly struggle with overstepping our bounds and making comments to applicants. I spend a lot of my time as chairman trying to control that kind of activity. So there's a lot of this aspect of what you're struggling with, and I have a lot of respect for what you're grappling with regard to all these nuances of points and
scoring and that stuff that I have no background in really to comment on. I also missed the last meeting, unfortunately, where this project was reviewed, but got a pretty good overview tonight of both projects again, reminded of the first one and then the second one. So I think, as Deb said, as Plan Commission, we've done our best to say both projects meet the basic criteria within our the conditions of approval. I'm going to take my Plan Commissioner hat off and sort of put my just architect and private citizen hat on. I think hands down the first project we saw is much more aesthetically pleasing, a much nicer environment to be in, a much nicer contribution to the city. I have lots of questions about how one project can avoid prevailing wages and one project is encumbered by prevailing wages. And I would have to believe that some of the amenities, both aesthetic and functional, would have to be reliant somehow on that delta. If the first project were somehow forced to comply with prevailing wages, I would have to imagine that some of the niceties would be stripped away. You're really looking at an apples and oranges kind of comparison here, which just makes it very difficult for you to do that. But having said that, I would believe that if you could somehow preserve through somehow regulating and limiting or restricting the first project to make sure that the city got all the amenities, materials, and function, whether it was built within the first year or two or 5, long term it would be a better contribution long term to the city from my perspective. I don't know if you have any other questions.
Can you comment on wearing your architect hat, the value of having a cohesive street where both sides have roughly the same color palette and architectural design versus having variety? Or
I don't see a significant value in having identical aesthetics on either side of the street. In fact, I would see probably more value in diversity. It sounds like that's a subtle nuance in terms of materials and colors and whatnot, but it seems like that wouldn't be a significant issue from my perspective, Rusty.
Okay, no other questions? Or you? Okay, go ahead.
Can you be a little more specific when you say that the second project aesthetically and amenity-wise is a superior proposal? Can you be a little more specific?
I'm confused about the first project we saw, the latest applicant.
Richmond.
Richmond.
Okay.
Let's refer to it as that. It seemed like both, from my perspective, aesthetically, the materials, the massing, the differences in planes and whatnot, and the landscaping in a significant way was just a much nicer, appealing project. The functional layouts of the units seem to be a lot more sort of thoughtful as well.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to get some scoring of this. I see Mark's writing a lot of notes, like a boxing judge here. Give us some scoring of the rounds and let us know what some of this, like, you're our counsel. Tell us whether we're hearing truth or fiction or unnecessary heat and not enough light.
Maybe all of the above. Really, as in many things, the scoring probably depends a lot on your criteria. You have somewhat different architecture. That speaks for itself. I have no background, training, and experience in that. You can draw your own conclusions on that. In terms of the phasing, the economics, the two proponents see the development opportunity quite differently. In one case, you have the Richmond group that says they can do it in one phase. They're optimistic they can get 9% tax credits, which is essentially their equity for the project, and that they'll go forward and build the project in one phase. You have Corporation Better Housing that says, don't think that's feasible given tiebreakers and the administration of the tax credit system, in order to be competitive, need to break it up into two chunks, need to have more local contribution to the project. So the way they see the project is fundamentally different. I think I may be the only one who thinks that there's some fairly significant differences in the architecture. Both the proponents said that's not true, so I must be wrong about that. As far as who's really going to get the approvals, wait a second. I won't answer. As far as the state system with the tax credits, one of the bedeviling things is you're always working off of last year's news. So any year is an imperfect predictor of the next year. There is something to the notion that the state likes to see localities put a lot of money into projects. I always wonder about that as a matter of social policy. I thought if the state wanted housing, they would want greater efficiency, not less, but that's not necessarily the state's view. I can tell you a couple of things in terms of timing, which I think is neutral as to both developers. In terms of Federal Home Loan Bank, and without regard to anybody's success in getting funding, it's not going to be feasible for anybody to have an agreement by the 1st of October. We have a 2-week publication deadline on a DDA. Even if I wrote it all night, if we had a notice tomorrow, we're not going to be able to get it published in time. You need a special meeting for that, so that's just not on the cards. The following Home Loan Bank meeting in April, I would say definitely is. In terms of pacing items, everyone seems to think they need the county home money to make the project viable. The county's deadline on when they expect to publish their notice of funding availability is October 19th. About all I found out from a junior county staff member, who was not really who I wanted to talk to, was that the notice will be available on the 19th. It isn't really going to be available before maybe within 72 hours when they post agenda packets. It would be, but till then, we're not really going to see what they're looking to. So I can't comment one way or another on the connection, if any, with MHSA funding. I simply don't know the answer to that, and I won't have a good idea till I can read the notice of funding availability, which comes out of the county, which I probably won't get my hands on to the 19th, or maybe 72 hours before that. The application deadline to the county is November 19th. In the case of both developers, it's going to take some time to prepare a disposition and development agreement. I've done it before. Don't be too shocked if the next one looks like the last one I did in many respects. But it does afford, for those who've enjoyed the evening and want more, it does afford an opportunity to kick the tires a bit, get a little more data. With the NOFA coming out on October 19th and an application deadline of November 19th, it'd be possible to consider a DDA on November 9th and not have people, running around and not having special meetings. That means publishing notice of a DDA on October 26th, which gives a bit of time. I wouldn't expect even under this time deadline that I'd want to start working on the DDA the 3rd week of October. And I'm not saying that this needs to guide your deliberations, but to the extent there's any information that needs to be vetted further, should be looked into further, there is some time to do that. And really, the presentations have been, they've been very coherent, and I think they've both been very thoughtful, but they're both very different. So it's a bit of a difficult comparison. I think the easy comparisons are in terms of what's on the printed page. Would you rather have, all things being equal, 1 phase or 2 phase? I think you'd rather have one phase. Would you rather spend less money or more money? No. You'd rather spend less money. Again, all things being equal. As far as the viability of the projects, though, the confidence in getting it accomplished, I think that's important. The last round with the county was probably less competitive, or 2 rounds ago was probably less competitive than I think most people thought. They had, at that time, I believe it was $8 million, and they were prepared to divvy it up to $2 million a project. And so I anticipated they would find 4 projects. They didn't find 4 they liked. They found 2. Loma Linda's ranked first. There was a second project, and that was it. They took the funding, rolled it over, and tried to apply it for rehabilitation projects. That didn't work. Now they're reprogramming it under the new NOFA. I can't give you fresh guidance on what they're going to look for. Loma Linda has put together a credible application the first time. I think the developer was an element of that. I think the planning department, the planning commission, the planning process was an element of that, and that's a constant. And you have 2 competing projects, both of which, I think should do fine as far as the county's concerned. Would I be interested in trying to get information out of the county about whether they're going to require a tie-in with MHSA? Yes, I would. Do I know how that comes out? I don't have a first clue. I think in terms of MHSA, there are some other collateral issues associated with that where you may want to get some more information to understand the characteristics of that program, what population you'd be dealing with, if the county can give you any assurances, what slice you're going to get out of that. As far as going through the packets, and just to give you an idea, and for people who don't understand, the staff made a concerted effort to get information from the developers, give them opportunity to propose something, and then to, in as uniform a way as possible, ask questions and seek to elicit more information. And we did that, and I thought for the most part the developers were responsive to the inquiries. In the case of Corporation for Better Housing, there is naturally a greater familiarity with their product because Corporation for Better Housing has developed projects in Loma Linda. So the staff is conversant, I'm conversant with what the process was, how the units were built, more or less how the 44 units are operating. I can't say the same thing with the Richmond group, which is probably more of a commentary on me than them. Personally, I would like to see more data, maybe have some site visits to projects where the developer, and to just try to get through whether it's a matter of both developers submitting applications that they submitted for 9% projects so we can really delineate what their role was in those projects. I struggled with the materials, but again, to me it's an apples and oranges comparison. I don't really need to read Corporation for Better Housing talking about Loma Linda projects because I'm familiar with their projects. In the case of the Richmond group, I had more trouble delineating what their role was. And in the process of asking questions, we tried to elicit some more information, and I'm not sure we communicated as clearly as we could have in that regard, which was probably my fault. So my thoughts are there's an opportunity to get additional data if you think it would be helpful to your decision and to your deliberations. The other options are you could pick a project or pick a developer, or you could pick no project. Now, in terms of the last, I would make the comment that either of these projects, as they're proposed, would zero out the agency's affordable housing deficit on very low and lows. I'm dismissive of that possibility, but I think the others are all things you could do. I would say you could direct staff to negotiate, but if that were the case, I think we would need parameters for that to be useful. For now, I think it's more a matter of a little more investigation and kicking the tires.
I have a question that's probably impertinent to ask it, but what would be wrong with picking one and it flops and we pick the other one to pick up the pieces and go for the next round?
That's your call. That,
Does
I
it,
mean,
what is this an entitlement that is vested in the failed project, or is it because there's no final go ahead because you didn't get the funding? Our approval is contingent. How does it work?
There's two different things going on. One is the entitlement side, where an entitlement is an entitlement, and the other is site control. You could, there are projects, there are agreements where agencies give developers one or two, and I've seen 3 bites at the apple for tax credits. I've seen agreements where the developer has one shot. So anywhere along that continuum, I'd say is within the realm of reason. From a practitioner standpoint, as an agency attorney, developers don't like me, probably for lots of reasons, but one, I prefer one shot and maybe 2. My problem with 3 shots is a lot can change in the world to the point where if the markets change, maybe the agency would look at the site, look at the project differently, be able to negotiate for other things. But the point you raised, the question you raised, yes, you could enter into an agreement. Somebody gets a try, and if they don't get it done by a certain time, you're done with that, and you either move on to a different agreement with the same developer, no agreement, or an agreement with somebody else. All those are possible choices.
That was a very good summary. I think you're hired.
Thank you.
I had a question for Ms. Mikas regarding the application process of October the 1st. And basically, our attorney just said that even if we approve something tonight, there's no way to put a DDA together in time. Is the DDA required in order to pick the application?
Well, it's an important part of scoring in order to show that we have exclusive site control, and it also is important for the land donation scoring.
So, is it?
And I wasn't aware of a 2-week
notice
publication
for DDA.
Right.
Okay. All I needed for now. Thanks.
So what's the pleasure of the council? Someone want to move approval of a project? You want to look at it longer? You want to?
My concern is we keep tabling this and it drags out, and
Do you want to? You share Mr. Hipp's concerns that we need to do more data gathering, see more projects?
Well, in my other world, I work often with a set of facts and figures that are put in front of me in a matter of minutes, and I have to make a decision. And I imagine in a perfect world, if we had all the time, we could overanalyze everything. And I'm not saying it doesn't necessarily require more thought and process. I get a little weary that we take too much time and we become indecisive as a council, always waiting and waiting and waiting.
Couple of thoughts. One is there's a lot of cold water put on one development where the other one had a history that can be counted on. I would think that we as a council would have to rely on staff who says, by the way, you guys are looking at a developer who's having a lot of questions as to their history, the ability to get funding. I can understand the other developer stating that, but I did not hear that from staff. That to me says a great deal. One of my concerns is been involved in this from the very beginning, back in March, and I've actually followed both companies closely along the way, and it was from the very beginning that I felt that, yes, we have a developer who successfully put in 2 projects in Loma Linda. However, sometimes having the whole street look the same is not necessarily a good thing. One of my concerns as the RDA chair is that we have city funds that are being expanded. It was important for us to consider another project that didn't use as many as our funds. So for example, why would that be important? Well, assuming that everything's equal, if the Richmond developer, for whatever reason, the home funds didn't come through, well, we do have $2 million, we can make up a difference. If the home funds don't come through for the other developer, we do not have the other $2 million. One of the issues that I have is really cost. And I know that there's reasons as to why the cost is higher, but nevertheless, it is an increased cost, and that is an issue. Based on the performance that has been shown us, we're being asked to subsidize to the tune of $4 million, which we don't have. So basically, we're approving something we don't have the money for. That is a huge concern for me. Another concern for me is that it's really easy for people to throw out statements as if they're facts, but I like to see proof. One of the things that really bothered me about the process is that the packet that was in front of me said a number of things to be determined. 5 minutes before the council meeting, we get a pro forma that actually shows that it's been determined. That tells me that either someone's not doing their homework or someone's trying to catch up and what you might call cram for a test. I'm very comfortable with coming to the realization that I believe both developers have an equal chance of getting all the financing that they're asking for. I don't have an issue with that. I think I go back to what our chairman stated, or with his hat as a public person as anyone else, is that our decision should be made mostly on which project we believe is going to serve the community better. To me, it's fairly straightforward as to the difference between the projects. I respectfully disagree with the Better Corporation for Housing assertion that there's really no difference between the projects. I think there's a significant difference between the projects, and I can list them almost with the back of my head just from looking at the picture and looking at the other ones. One has a distinct clubhouse, which is much bigger. That may be important to some people, that may not be. However, as a community, I think that, as Mr. Stewart said, stop ignoring that neighborhood. The way you bring attention to it is by developing it and developing it right. We do have 2 great developments across the street. I think we have an opportunity to add another one. What makes the other one more unique? I think it provides, and perhaps I need to bring a little bit of my own background. I work as an occupational therapist, and I have had the opportunity to travel quite a few senior projects and actually talk to seniors. And I've actually traveled to your project in Grand Terrace and talked to people who live there, actually one resident. I've seen senior projects in Rancho Cucamonga, in Rialto, in Fontana, and Yucaipa. So I'm quite familiar with what seniors need. One of the things that I found out, for example, that I picked up on that I think is a huge thing is the fact that one developer provides more parking. Every single one that I've been to, I've had problems parking. That is, maybe it's bad luck or what, and maybe not all the projects were affordable, so maybe that wasn't an issue. But to me, parking is always an issue in the town. People always have friends and relatives who come and visit. One other observation that I made was that some of the seniors complain about sometimes management, how they don't always cater to seniors' needs. They always talk about how they're offering all these amenities, but yet when it comes down to the club room or the center that they have is not always open all the time. So those are things that, I take into account. One other thing that I think is fairly important is bathrooms. I believe there's a huge advantage over the fact that the 2 bedrooms have 2 bathrooms. Seniors sometimes need assistance with people who may stay overnight a couple nights. Sometimes they have family who visit. Having that second bathroom, I think, is very important. From a point of beauty to the community, I think balconies, yes, they can cause an issue. There's no doubt about that. If everybody puts their junk on the balcony, it doesn't help the community. However, once again, it's all about management. Same reason why some apartments have drugs versus others don't is because management is there to enforce the rules and make it real clear as to what needs to be allowed and not allowed. the list goes on and on. I think the pool, the jacuzzi, the fitness center, the library, all those things are important and vital to making sure the seniors that we have in our community have the best possible amenities. But when it boils down to it, I still think that if you take all that aside, it's the amount of subsidy that we have to provide, and we have limited resources, and I believe that if we can conserve those resources for other opportunities, or perhaps for the risk that not all the funding may come in, that actually adds more flexibility to what we can do. So with that, I know that everybody else can weigh in, but I have no problem with putting in a motion that we approve the Richmond development.
Mr. Brown.
The question I was going to ask, and Mayor Pro Tem Chair of RDA answered, I think some of it. I was going to ask whether the executive committee has taken a formal position or has any further weighing to add besides what you mentioned this evening.
We just both moved them on equally the same to the Planning Commission. Our only concern is that both developers had an opportunity to present and make sure that they provided us with all the information we needed to make a decision. I think everybody can weigh in as to whether that's correct or not, whether they have questions. I've done this long enough to tell you that there will always be questions.
Again, relying on my experience outside of this, and this again is very new to me, but my experience in dealing with people is that I tend to listen more to people who present their argument instead of, I don't want to say attacking is kind of a strong word, but instead of putting down the other person or the other participant. And both sides were given the opportunity to present tonight. One side spent a great deal of time talking about their project. The other side spent a great deal of time talking about the other presenter. When they were asked specific questions, both sides, one side provided clear, direct responses, and the other one did not, in my opinion. And again, I look for those type of things. And we talked, Councilman Popescu talked about amenities and things like that, and social services. There are a lot of social services that are available in the community because they are available in the community. Neighborhood watch programs are provided by law enforcement because that's just what law enforcement does. It would really bother me to take those type of things and kind of lump them all in with a project and to claim that those are part of a project, when in reality those are things that are available to everyone. Specific amenities or specific programs, such as having a pool or a jacuzzi or things like that, are tangible to me. So that being said, I would second Mr. Popescu's motion.
I'm speaking in opposition to the motion. A truism I learned long ago is that quality is the standard and time is the variable. And not to want to prolong debate on a project unnecessarily. I see the differences between the physical facilities and amenities in the projects. I am not yet clear on exactly what the funding ramifications are. And as our attorney has recommended that we kick the tires a little bit and so that we're comparing apples with apples and not apples with oranges, would add a level of clarity for me that would be very helpful. I think we also heard from the chair of our planning commission advising that there are confusing issues along that line that some clarity would make our decision a little easier. So I will vote in opposition to the motion for those reasons. I'd like to kick the tires a little bit with some professional help.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Would you consider one of the things that was discussed, which is that a decision on one developer is dependent upon their ability to get the financing, and if that fell through, then we obviously then develop them for the other one?
That comes across to me as shoot, ready, aim. I want to aim properly first and make the best decision we can make, and then stick with it with confidence that we know it'll work.
Okay.
the comments that I'd like to make, just a few in summary. Number one, I know a lot of the public doesn't believe that every decision that we make is not cut and dried, often way ahead of time. I truly had not made up my mind about which direction to go tonight. Been torn both direction, have the experience and track record of one developer and seeing how things have gone. On the other hand, hearing architect recommending design features of the Richmond project, an architect that I value highly, especially since I'm sitting in his former council seat here, means a lot to me. So I do think that's very important in trying to weigh these, but it bothers me that we're still down to seemingly the final fact of apples versus oranges, and I don't know how to weigh and make a proper decision of apple versus oranges. I do hate postponing decisions, drives me nuts. That's one of the worst things that government seems to do, and here I'm part of that problem, as Councilman Duper has very appropriately said. But based on legal counsel asking to do a little more diligence, based on the fact that we still seem to have conclusions from individuals that I'm looking to for guidance that this is apples versus oranges, I cannot move forward tonight.
That leaves me sitting in the middle. Chairs don't have to break ties very often. Just a comment about the nature of the discussion tonight. I never personally fault anybody for pointing out obvious deficiencies in the opposition's argument. I think that's fair game. I think that in this situation we've got two projects, one of which is about 40 to 45% more expensive, breaks it into two phases and requires a significantly larger contribution from our redevelopment agency and from our city in the form of direct contributions and loans and waiving of some fees. So the cost to us is significantly higher with one project versus the other, and the cost of the actual production of the project is significantly higher. Now, to the extent that's required to get extra funds, I'm not sure that it's an advantage, because why spend more if you're just going to get the same amount more that it costs to develop it? It just seems like kind of an inefficient waste of resources to me. I'm impressed by the fact that the Richmond group can make a swat at it, and if they're not successful, then, and on the prediction of Mr. Brumbaugh, they won't be successful. So he actually, when I asked my impertinent question, could we approve one and then give it to the other if they fail, and he said, I'll take second shot at it. So he's predicting you won't make it. So there's your challenge if we give it to you. I think that the discussion tonight has been extremely useful. I think we've attacked this problem from almost every angle. The only angles left are basically vetting Richmond as to their veracity and their competence. And I personally think they've submitted enough evidence that they're competent, and they've got projects all over the country. And they really don't have anything to gain at all by putting forward a project that will not succeed, because they put all this effort into preparing a proposal, and it gets them zero if it fails in its funding attempts. So I don't see any real reason why they would, on purpose, sour a deal. There's not, if let's say they're a complete fraud, they wouldn't gain a single penny from not being funded. So
I don't really see a whole lot of extra gain from doing more due diligence on that. And in the interest of avoiding further dilatory behavior on the part of the city council, because we've already spent a number of hours, I believe I will be voting in favor of the motion.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask for clarification on the motion? Before you on the agenda, you have under item 3A, which would be the Richmond group, 2 recommended actions. First, to approve the mitigated negative declaration, and second, to approve the PPD.
I believe we would have to clarify the motion.
Our first goal was to choose a developer. Now I think it's okay to go ahead and make the second formal motion to deal with all the legal processes that we need to go through. So I guess I'll go ahead and make another motion that we approve a precise plan. First, I guess it would be item 3A, the mitigated negative declaration in relationships to precise plan and design.
Do we need to do that as a separate motion?
Or
Can we consolidate?
We usually do them separately.
okay.
But,
So I would make a motion that we approve item 3A, the mitigated negative declaration in reference to the TRG Pacific Development LLC project.
I'll second that motion with the direction that staff work as diligently as they can to attempt any possible deadlines that are looming, and let's see if we can make this happen, because I think it would be impressive if it could.
Okay, so there's a motion and second for the mitigated negative declaration 3A. Is there any other discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion?
I'm opposed. I think we're a little ahead of our facts.
And
There's
opposed?
a no here. So
yes, okay. So 2 noes and 3 yeses, so that passes. 3B, do you have a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion for 3B. Approve precise plan of design 10-138-, which is 2 3-story buildings, including a clubhouse with clubroom, business center, library, laundry, and administrative offices, 3 resident activity rooms on each floor, large swimming pool, gazebo, garden, courtyard, community gardens, and walking paths. I need some clarification as to, in the staff report, there are a number of recommendations by the Planning Commission. Do we need to take those in consideration at this time, or when do we address those?
We have included the recommendations of the Planning Commission that pertain specifically to the project as conditions of approval. So if you approve the PPD based on the findings and subject to the amended conditions, then that should cover it.
Okay, that's fine, and I will go ahead and make the motion subject to the approval of the Planning Commission and its recommendations.
I second that.
Okay, is there any discussion? Any opposition?
No.
2 noes, 3 yeses, so that passes. My next question is, what do we do with item 4?
item number 4 obviously stands on its own, but if the council has made the decision not to go forward with the DDA with that developer, then that project would fail due to the inability to go forward. However, you could approve the plan, or rather deny it without prejudice, so that it could be brought back at a later date if Richmond Group were to fall by the wayside. Or you could continue it to a future date pending approval of the DDA with Richmond.
Regarding item 4, there was a negotiation in DDA prepared months and months ago, and the item has been carried forward. No one on staff, I believe, had an expectation that any action would be taken to approve item 4. It's a bit of a relic that could be tabled, or it could be dropped at this point. I think 3B is a separate question on whether action would be taken to approve the entitlement. I think staff understands, given the comments of the board, that we would proceed to attempt to negotiate out a disposition development agreement with the Richmond Group. That said, it's not necessarily dispositive of what you want to do with 3B.
I move that we table that item number 4.
I'll second that.
What about 3B? I think it's kind of...
Separately?
Are we better off with silence on 3B and 4, or do we have to actively table them, or would you rather we deny them without prejudice?
4, I think, should be tabled. 3B is your call on whether you approve, deny, or table, or defer. We have one complete entitlement, and we know who we'll be dealing with in terms of negotiating and endeavoring to facilitate their efforts to get other funding. But it's really the council's pleasure on what you do with 3B.
So if we approve 3B, would they both be heading for funding, or without the mitigated negative declaration, it would?
No. Well, the direction to staff is to deal with the Richmond group. Okay. So that would be the only group with which we would be negotiating. It would just conclude a process, which it's your call on how you want to deal with 3B. 4, there's just nothing that's ready to go forward on that at this time.
Yeah, 3B could not be approved without first approving the mitigated negative declaration.
Okay.
But you could deny 3B without prejudice. Tabling is not, that's more of a Roberts motion. It's not so much a motion under land use planning. So I would recommend you simply deny it without prejudice.
I move that we deny item 3B without prejudice.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on that? Is there any opposition? And
I'll actually vote in the affirmative on that one.
okay, so 4-1. Thank you on that. And so 4, just, is there any obligation with a notice public hearing to conduct a public hearing despite its mooted nature?
No, nobody's asked to speak on that.
Okay.
And it is moot.
Okay. Very good. Then we will move on to the consent calendar.
I'd like to pull items 10 and 11, possible conflict issues.
And I agree with Mr. Brower on that, and I just want to pull item number 9 for clarification and just a comment on it. I guess we can ask for advice from our city attorney as to the issue regarding 10 and 11 is going to be possibly a conflict. Do we want to just deal with the rest of the agenda and then deal with those 2 items at the end?
Whatever your pleasure. Mr. Mayor, could I move we approve items 5 through 8 on the consent calendar?
If I'm allowed to conflict myself out of item 5.
That's fine with us.
Okay, then I am officially recusing myself on item 5. I'll take it as a motion on items 5 through 8, and I will not participate in any of the votes, and I'm not necessary for a quorum, so I'll just stay out of all of them. Is there a
I've
second?
moved items 5 through 8.
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing none, it passes. So we have items 9 through 11. Let's go with 9.
I have no problem with number 9 other than just making sure that we get some clarification from staff. I'm very much familiar with the process here, which was the general plan was recently updated. We had some things we had to clear up with the housing element. Based on that staff report, it looks like the California Department of Housing had some questions regarding staff's implementation of the measured needs of the housing element and making sure that that's all done properly. I am very much in favor of making sure that's done. My only concern is that the whole general plan process started long ago and is very costly, and I understand that there's only $9,500, but I'm just hoping that the staff can assure me that this would be the last batch of money that we'd be spending on this general plan and the housing element.
We have gotten a couple of letters from HCD over the last year with comments, and we're told that was the last bit. and we resubmit to show that we, made the changes. The goal being, of course, to get a certified document so that we are eligible for other types of funding that would assist our housing programs. We had hoped that the last go-round was it, so this came as a surprise to us. And apparently, it all ties into Special Planning Area D, and it's a little problematic because the state requires that we have an inventory of all the properties that we're going to be using, and for Area D, we don't know specifically where the housing is going to go because it depends on how and who develops it. So they're being a little sticky on that, and so we're working on redoing that portion of the inventory, and so that's why it's going to cost a bit more money. And yes, I think this will be the last round. I've already told them we don't have any more money, please, no more. And it is actually $9,200.
Well, I move item number 9.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Any opposition? Okay, it passes. Number 10.
Along with Councilman Breyer, I need to recuse myself from 10 and 11 for conflict. No?
I was just conferring briefly, I might add, regarding 10 and 11. These are agreements between the city and Lilburn Corporation directly. The medical center of the university is not a party to these particular agreements that are before you. They previously provided funding as a pass-through for these, but we are not contracting in these items with the university medical center. So there's not a 1090.
Okay, there's not a 1090, but is there a common law conflict with regard to the fact that these agreements with Lilburn are entered into for the purposes of meeting LUNC's needs?
I don't see that at this point. We're performing a city function of analyzing these proposals, and that needs to go forward. If you're uncomfortable with that, obviously we could go through the straw exercise.
And I imagine we do it for 10 and 11 if we were to do it. Is anybody mollified by that? Satisfied?
I'm comfortable with advice of attorney.
I am too. I have no problem with voting on it as long as I don't see any financial benefit one way or another for us to just do pass-through items.
I will agree to the previous comments, although I can't help but remember back to a previous city attorney that would give us advice and mention, well, if I have to be wrong, I'll come visit you in jail at least.
And you don't live within 500 feet of these areas. So, okay, then we'll proceed with 10 and 11 without drawing straws, although I wanted to bring the straws out on their maiden voyage for my mayoral fee. So, yeah,
I'll go ahead and move item 10 and 11.
No, before we do that, can Mr. Wiley submitted a comment? Okay, he wants an explanation.
I guess Deborah, feel free. I think you're probably the expert on this.
And this is for the
Items 10 and 11, I guess, Bill.
We have two projects that are to be submitted in the near future, and they're both, one is Loma University, and the other is Loma University Medical Center as applicants. They have opted to have the environmental done to meet the California Environmental Quality Act through a pass-through account with the city, and we are contracting with Lilburn Corporation to do the environmental for both of these two Loma University and Medical Center projects. I'm sorry? Yes, they are. Yeah, they are new projects, and they will be submitted to the city within the next couple of months, I anticipate, or at least one of them will. The other one is a little more problematic.
I'll go ahead and move item number 10 and 11.
I'll provide a second on that.
Okay, any discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, it's approved. So we'll move on to old business number 12. City Attorney has a comment regarding the Historical Commission's recommendation that we purchase some Centennial Pathway pavers and markers for Loma University.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this was an item that I've pondered somewhat because it brings up various issues involving potential conflicts of interest. And the one that I focused on in my review was Government Code Section 1090. And that particular section is problematic. It's complicated. There's 1090, 1091, 1091.5 that include exceptions. There's the rule of necessity that we joke about, but which is a very serious matter when you employ it. My conclusion was that unfortunately I do not feel that we could find an appropriate exception to Government Code Section 1090 which would allow the City Council to contract for this particular purpose with the institution that employs several of the council members. We could do that if we had a majority of the council which did not have a conflict of interest. Government Code Section 1091 provides an exception, a remote interest exception for employees of a nonprofit organization, provided that council member is recused, does not participate in the action, and states the nature of their conflict on the record. We could do that as to one or two council members. We could not do it as to three because we would be without a quorum. That is where we normally invoke the rule of necessity. However, the rule of necessity under Government Code Section 1090 is limited to situations involving procurement of essential services which cannot be obtained from any other source or fundamental functions of the governmental entity. In this particular case, regretfully, the purchase of these historical markers would not fall within one of those two categories, and therefore my conclusion was that the rule of necessity, which we apply in other situations, could not be applied in this case, and therefore we could not fill in the council by drawing straws, which would leave us without a quorum to act on this matter. And that was my conclusion. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
So item 12 dies. Okay, that leaves us with no new business or any reports of councilmen.
Late hour, I'll try and make this brief. I guess being the senior member of the council, maybe I can reminisce. But I do think it is appropriate, very briefly, as having recognized Ms. Rosenbaum for her service, seeing Chairman Nichols here, Planning Commission was a bit of a struggle to establish 17 years ago. There was a fair amount of opposition. Like anything, it's not one person, even though it was a specific interest of mine. Councilman Nichols at that time worked very hard with me to establish that. It subsequently was threatened to be disbanded several times in concerted efforts, but I think we've seen over those years a tremendous value in looking at the projects tonight. All the input and all the architectural details and features, and I'm really glad we have dedicated individuals that do serve on Planning Commission. Second quick point, I went to the LA County Fair last week, went into the Garden of Flowers building with all the floral exhibits, and there was two of the big featured floral displays in the main hall. I looked at the name, Miss Iola, Loma, Linda, California, and it really made me proud. I go to the fair multiple times every year, and I don't recall ever seeing anyone featured with their floral designs. So I'm fortunately not familiar with her, but I'm very impressed with your work, and make us all proud to be from Loma Linda.
I just wanted to give a little report that we're out with traffic engineers, and we're going to be doing a little bit of dithering with the timing of traffic lights at some of our signature traffic jams, and we're going against conventional wisdom from traffic engineers, and I believe their conventional wisdom sometimes requires a little bit of tweaking. So we're going to see if that Anderson Redlands Boulevard intersection maybe admits a few more cars per cycle than it currently does, and we'll give you an update on that. If it does show improvement, there will probably be such a collective sigh of relief that everyone will hear it, and I don't need to announce it. But, are there any reports of officers? Okay, then
Just had a quick question.
you're not an officer.
Will you be attending the League of Cities meeting this week?
Yes, sir.
You'll be able to report back to us what you learned, I guess, at the next meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
Or in his updates. Yeah, those of you who are not on the council, you miss Jarb's updates. You get it in the city, in the chamber publication, but he gives us some really juicy stuff every week or two. Every 2 weeks, yeah, we enjoy it. Okay, then we're adjourned, and we're back to the redevelopment agency.
Call to order the redevelopment agency. Item number C, our city attorney already referred to in our prior meeting. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Any oral reports, public participation? I did not get any slips, so I take it there's none. There's no conflicts of interest. Item number G is a scheduled item. We already dealt with that item when we were in the joint meeting. I believe that item was tabled. And item number H, which is the minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve those minutes.
Second that.
I was scrambling to look at them to make sure they're correct, right? Otherwise, do I hear any opposition? Seeing none, it's so carried. No reports. We therefore adjourned until our next scheduled meeting on September the 28th. Correct?
And if anybody thinks that this council runs in lockstep, just review the transcript of this meeting.